Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Hello, welcome to Paranormal Universe, where all paranormal perspectives apply. Join paranormal historian and ufologist Kevin Malek and psychic demonologist Jennifer Malek as they navigate us through the different categories of the unknown and the unexplained, including ghosts and haunted places, cryptids and monsters, aliens and UFOs, theology and mythology, metaphysics, forbidden archaeology, urban legends and folklore, conspiracies, crimes, and corruption, with top analysis from the experts of these disciplines. If it's amazing, unusual, or mysterious, if it's bizarre, creepy, and fantastic, if it's unbelievable, paranormal, or supernatural, it's here on Paraversal Universe. Here are your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. Whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are, welcome to Paraversal Universe, brought to you by the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited at the Northwoods Paranormal Resource Center here in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malek.
Hello, everybody, and happy Friday.
Paraversal Universe is produced by Kat Hobson, the voice of Fate Magazine Radio, over at WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. We're also heard on WCET 101.7 FM out of Columbia, South Carolina, and the Rift Radio Network family based out of Lakeside, Virginia. Welcome one and all. And hello to everyone in the chat room. We look forward to your questions, comments, input as always. The archive for the show will be available as well. Show archives from over the years can be found in various places on the web, including our Archives Like page on Facebook called Paraversal Universe Show Archives. Also check out our guest promo page, Paraversal Universe Radio, for what's upcoming in the near future. We hope everyone is doing well, as always. We are now into November. It's getting cold here in northern Wisconsin, as the majority of the leaves have fallen. Of course, there are more leaves to fall, and it will get colder. But be that as it may, we have a killer show for you today, as we bring you a roundtable on the topic of paracryptozoology. But first, as always, let's do our shout-outs. Shout-outs go to those people who share our show banners on regular basis or recently that we are aware of. We always appreciate it greatly and thank you kindly. So who do we have this week?
This week we have Walt Christos, Thoughts of Christos, Katrina Cooper, Rhodey Speak, Dennis Koch, Cindy Liu, Robert Bull, Howie Odell, The Orion Effect, Gene Broida, Metaphysical Bounce, Kat Hobson, WBHM, Lawrence Demiza, Lisa Reynaga, Sudan, Lori Kreslaw, Ty Ward, Steve Carrington, Anomalous Universe, Dr. Chuck Kennedy, Project PSI Institute, Fate Magazine Radio, Clairvoyance, Todd David Anderson, Beyond Ultra Popular, Jock Brokus, Paranormal Daily News, DM Siegling, Tom McGuire, Bruce Tiffany, Tom Jacobs, Surreal Mix, Erin Stewart, and Gavin Lee Davies from the Paranormal Chronicles.
Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it when them banners get shared around. That really helps us. So thank you. Thank you very much. Alrighty. Today we are going to be discussing paracryptozoology, which explores the idea that some of these cryptids people are witnessing may have powers or abilities that humans simply don't possess. It's not really a new concept, but the idea has been gaining ground as of late. So today we will be discussing some of these creatures people report seeing, as well as the different possibilities for the anomalous concerning which. And we have a diverse roundtable of esteemed colleagues who have spent a great deal of time studying and researching the unknown and unexplained. And joining us is cryptozoologist Scott Mardis from the Zombie Plesiosaur Society. How you doing, Scott?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming on Paraversal Universe again.
Mm-hmm.
And next we have folklorist Danny B. Stewart from the original Provo, Utah Haunted Tours. How you doing, Danny?
I'm surprisingly coherent. Thanks.
Alrighty. And Fortean researcher Steve Patrick Carrington from Anomalous Universe. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Good. It's a honor to have you back on. It's an honor to have all of you back on.
Yeah, we're really excited for this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you.
And this is a really I love the diversity that we have this week on this, because we're going to be exploring this from many different perspectives and angles. I think we have our list of cryptids or monsters, and we have a list of possible abilities people report concerning those reports. Before we get into the specifics, let's open the floor with any opening thoughts or statements concerning today's discussion. So, who would like to start it off?
Well, I'd like to say that I am very much in the flesh and blood cryptozoology camp. And I think that it's too early to throw in the towel on finding physical animals behind some of these monster reports. To me, the most promising are obviously Patterson's Bigfoot and some of these lake monsters. I think if you propose a paranormal answer to these questions, you need to have some kind of a sensible scientific framework to back it up that makes sense from a physics standpoint, because cryptozoology is already working under the onerous that we're questioning current knowledge about biology, about the existence of these unlikely animals. When you add the paranormal explanation on top of it, you're not only questioning what we know about biology, but also about physics as well, which puts an added onerous on the argument.
Okay. Danny.
Yo. So, I spent my entire life kind of steeped in this type of this topic, whether it be cryptozoology or what people call, or label the paranormal. And I'm very much a flesh and blood cryptozoologist too, but I want to also make it very clear, I'm not a cryptozoologist. That came out wrong. I'm not a cryptozoologist. I'm more an artist than anything. I'm a performance artist. I'm a folklorist and a traditions bearer. And I collect stories. And I've collected so many different kinds of stories over my lifetime that some things point to science, not being able to adequately explain what people claim to be experiencing. Now, what they could be experiencing could be strictly folklore, completely fluff. And to me, I still collect those stories, whether or not they are fluff or not, because it's still an important aspect of folklore. But when we talk about flesh and blood cryptozoology, you have to understand, and I think up the fact that so many animals that are alive today were monsters, like the mountain gorilla. the giant panda, the Komodo dragon. Those were considered monsters. The aardvark was thought to be a monster, and also the use of the word monster over and over again, which, has polluted a lot of what, so-called cryptozoologists claim to be pursuing. So what I do with my approach is I look at different aspects of folklore, myth, and legend and try to come up with hypotheses. Because in my opinion, I don't think that we're ever going to really be able to properly define or prove anything in the paranormal realm. But I think it's fun to hypothesize about certain things like the Loch Ness creature being, a type of water kelpie or, undine, something like that. So I'm all about just talking about it and bringing things to the table for discussion. That's where I'm at.
Sweet. And Steve?
Yeah, well, along that line, I'm pretty much with Danny. I believe in flesh and blood cryptids that are out there, but on the other hand, I believe, some of them cannot be explained by rational means, by, for natural, being a natural animal or creature. Mainly, later I'll be speaking about Bigfoot, which I believe, not to narrow that one down, but to me, it just doesn't fit into the normal realm now from hearing all the accounts of its strange possible aspects of it, and that's where I stand. I mean, I believe like the Loch Ness Monster and Champ, the oceans are vast and big, and we don't know, what lies out in the deep oceans and in these deep lakes. Things can hide, but with something like Bigfoot, right now, I'm more on the fence of it being somewhat not a normal creature, and that's pretty much where I stand. I'm kind of on the fence, but I guess I would lean more toward the woo factor, if you ask me.
Sure. And I think Bigfoot's going to be the animal or cryptid creature monster that we start with.
Can I add one more point?
Sure.
I just want to say I think part of the problem is that there are creatures that are loosely classified as being cryptids that I don't really believe are cryptids and are better off dealt with in fields like parapsychology and ufology, and I think that's part of the problem we're discussing today.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes. There was, a few years ago, probably like 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe even longer, I wrote an article in Supernatural magazine, in Supernatural magazine, and it just brought up the idea that here we have this field. You have cryptozoology, of course, but then there are so many anomalous reports with some of these sightings that it seems there is a divide in the camps. Half of everybody, believes it's not. There's no supernatural, paranormal, anything going on, and then the other half says, well, there might be, because how else can we explain some of this stuff? Right. The problem is that the woo camp, if we could call it that, would get shunned anytime it was brought up, and kind of beaten down, because there's many in cryptozoology that would prefer to see it completely or zoological opposed to supernatural or paranormal. So I felt there needed to be a definition to define this field, and so that people could discuss it with peers and treat it like science, like it needs to be, without fear of ridicule, and then that way the crypto camp can have their traditional contemporary cryptozoology without the woo. And so...
Well, see, the problem with that is that people like me are trying to push cryptozoology into the realms of accepted science biology. And the paranormal stuff is standing in the way and driving the conventional scientists away from the flesh and blood cryptozoology by contamination. If you can
even
understand.
before that, though, they were pushing it away. I mean, when I was teaching at UVU,
this is making the problem worse.
I don't think anything's going to help us until we actually have a plesiosaur, the shores of Loch Ness.
I agree with you. You got to have some kind of type specimen. The closest thing we got so far is this giant eel idea based on the environmental DNA study from Loch Ness, which is still up in the air.
Before we can move anywhere, we need an I told you so moment. That's what we're waiting for, is an I told you so moment. And we haven't got that yet. And it's unfortunate that, I mean, so many scientists out there aren't doing their jobs. In fact, you know what? If zoologists actually did their jobs, there would be no need for cryptozoology. They'd be like the grandfathers of
the field of cryptozoology was conventional zoology's refusal to answer the question.
Well, yeah,
and to investigate it.
I think and the one thing we can't forget is that whether people like it or not, cryptozoology still deals with the unknown and unexplained. And because you'll never get away from that, I just felt that if you could define the two camps, cryptozoology and paracryptozoology, para being next to, right? Para, next to, or not.
Sort of a bridge between
right, because
cryptozoology and parapsychology.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's
basically parapsychology focusing on some of the cryptid reports and being open to different things. Like when we go out in the field doing the paracryptozoology stuff, we're applying different things that traditionally aren't used in cryptozoology investigations, like psychics, credible psychics, or SLS cameras, or just all different a whole host of things. Everything from spiritual to metaphysical to, and the parapsychology, and the ufology, and it all.
If I ever give up on a flesh and blood champ, I may take some of that stuff to Lake Champlain with me, but I'm not there yet. So
right.
Let's wait and see.
I think I think myself personally, when it comes to some of the stuff we're going to be talking about, that from what I've learned and from my experiences and my studies in this field, is that there are some cryptids out there that may have paranormal aspects to them that we might not be fully aware of.
Right. Well, there's a concept in parapsychology called an animal poltergeist. What is the difference between an animal poltergeist and a paranormal cryptid? Is there any?
It depends on your definition of poltergeist.
Well, then you got to talk about nature spirits and fae traditions.
Right.
Yeah.
Nature spirit folklore, the old gods. The old gods are today's devils. And they've been vilified and pushed to the back.
Name, they had to call it something. Maybe we're just calling it by a different name today.
Yeah, and I mean when I look at the metaphysical elements of cryptozoology, I'm directly steered towards fairy traditions and nature spirit traditions. Like Bigfoot, I think. I mean, I was asking my friend and mentor, Dr. Paul Bybee, the other day, what do you think is more likely? Do you think that a massive species, just focusing on Bigfoot alone, do you think a large population of species has stayed hidden from mankind for centuries? One solitary creature, immortal creature, has lingered this whole time. It's completely folklore nonsense, or it could be nature spirits if you're a faithful human being, or are open-minded to that element. And he thought for a minute. He said, the nature spirits does make more sense if there is such a thing. That doesn't answer the question, but I think it's the vocabulary we use when we're trying to define and intermingle the paranormal with cryptozoology. We have to be better with our vocabulary. We got to use the word monster so much less. And even we got to come up with a new word for paranormal, because there's so much baggage with it. Once you bring that up, it's almost like the original people.
I don't see an unknown animal species falling under the umbrella of paranormal. It's just an unknown animal species we haven't found yet.
We're going to take a
We're-
commercial break here.
All right. This is Paraversal Universe that you were listening to. It is time for our first commercial break. We will be right back with our panel for the next segment.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
To the believer, the evidence is overwhelming. To the skeptic, there will never be enough. Hello everyone. Join Kevin and Jennifer Malek, the host of Paraversal Universe, every Friday here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Also heard on WCET FM and The Rift. Log on or tune in as they check out the mysteries found within the 8 categories of the unknown and unexplained, including ghosts and haunted places, aliens and UFOs, theology and mythology, cryptids and monsters, urban legends and folklore, conspiracies, metaphysics, and forbidden archaeology. Listen as Kevin and Jennifer interview the top minds in their respective fields as they share theories and information regarding these unsolved mysteries. For future show and archive information, one can find Paraversal Universe on Facebook, Twitter, and MeWe under various Paraversal Universe headings. So, for excellent talk radio about the unknown and unexplained, check out Paraversal Universe, where all paranormal perspectives apply. Brought to you by the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society, LTD, and produced by WBHMDB.com.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back from our first commercial break, everyone. This is Paraversal Universe, produced by WBHM Digital Broadcasting, also heard on WCET-FM and the Rift Radio Network. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malek, and we'd like to take a minute to thank everyone that makes Paraversal Universe possible, including graphic art director Lawrence D. Miza, music theme by Matt Stenz, announcer Frank Lee, producer and owner at WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Kat Hobson. Also to Howie Odell at the Rift family, and to Michael Vera at WCET-FM. Thank you all for carrying our content and working together on our behalf and the behalf of our audience everywhere. And of course, a huge thank you to God in heaven, whose strength beyond strength is stronger than all, for granting us this wonderful show and opportunity here to be with you all.
Amen.
An appreciation to the various platforms we are on, including Spotify, iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Twitch, YouTube, Daily Motion, TalkStream Live, TuneIn, Blog Talk, Podbean, Google Play, Mixcloud, and Paranormal Livestream app, which is streamed and restreamed from various other outlets all over the world via the internet. This segment of Paraversal Universe is brought to you by the UFO Wisconsin Research Team, Wisconsin's alternative to MUFON, and also by the Paranormal Daily News, who have a page on their website dedicated to Paraversal Universe and the Paralogian Report. How cool is that? where our latest episodes are listed and linked. This is Paraversal Universe, and we are talking paracryptozoology with cryptozoologist Scott Mardis, folklorist Danny B. Stewart, and Fortean researcher Steve Patrick Carrington. And to start off this segment, why don't we start with Bigfoot, the king of the cryptids, most popular cryptid. I know, Steve, over the years, you have brought many articles to the surface for TN concerning Bigfoot and Bigfoot reports, and what are some of the things that are striking you to put you, I guess, on the paracryptozoology side?
That puts me on the woo fence, you mean?
Sure. Don't feel bad. I'm there with you. So
I don't mind being on the woo fence, believe me. No, just like I said, I'm on the fence. I at first I thought, Bigfoot could be an unknown primate, but after all these years and all, it's just I really don't believe in the migrating of these animals and from one area to another. I mean, these animals are being spotted everywhere now, if you want to call them animals, humanoids. And to me, they're just, yes, unlike, other cryptids that we really haven't got any evidence of. Of course, with Bigfoot, we've got the cast, the tracks, the casts, the sightings, including, like Scott brought up earlier with me, the Patterson-Gimlin film was a breaker for me, a deal breaker, because that's really probably the only authentic film I would say we've caught of one. But what makes me, believe that it might be something a little different now is it's just all these reports and accounts coming in, of these creatures disappearing in an instant and things like that with glowing red eyes. I understand reflection from light, but these people are saying these eyes are actually glowing from within, like creating their own light source, which would not be normal by any sense. And also, what turned me more toward the para side of it is a lot of these creatures, or hairy hominids, have been seen around UFO activity, or even there's been some accounts of seeing them coming from a UFO or boarding one. Now, there was a 1973 flap in Pennsylvania. That was a big flap of hairy humanoids and UFO activity. And there was a good book written by Stan Gordon called Silent Invasion, and this is all about that flap, about UFOs being seen and hairy hominids in the vicinity with them. So to me, it just doesn't add up to a flesh and blood animal anymore, a simple flesh and blood animal.
Okay. Let's, so, yeah, on the list, for the trait side of the list, and I think we can probably apply this to any cryptid we talk about. I'll read all of them, and then we can start with the anomalous lights and the UFO connection, because Steve just brought it up. But that being one, mind speak being one, shape-shifting being one, hole in the veil theory, demonic possibilities, ghosts of cryptids, portals, and cloaking or invisibility.
Yep.
Them are a lot of
abilities.
Yeah, right. And who's got, well, of course, the first question is, which creatures are real and not.
Right.
But yeah, certainly these things are reported at different times by different people, different walks of life. And even if 5% of all these reports are accurate, we still got something going on.
Right.
Scott.
Yes.
Thoughts?
Well, as far as portals or dimensional travel or time travel, the two most theories with the most meat on them are this idea about quartz opening up some kind of a time doorway, which has been promoted by this guy named John Brandenburg. Let me see, I've got a summary of it here. I'm going to read it real quick. Let's see. Give me a second here.
Sure.
I'll explain it in his own words. All right. Physicist John Brandenburg theorizes that time travel might be the cause of lots of sea monster sightings, including the Loch Ness Monster. He says because lakes like Loch Ness have a large concentration of quartz capable of generating enormous amounts of electromagnetism, this could have caused a portal through time to open in the lake. His theory is that Nessie might be going back and forth through this portal, which is why no one's been able to find her. So essentially he's talking about large amounts of quartz generating electromagnetism, opening up some kind of time doorway, and marine reptiles from the Mesozoic coming through these time doorways and then going back out. Obviously, he's suggesting long-necked plesiosaurs, which are the closest match of a known animal in the fossil record that we know to the Loch Ness Monster. And the other idea, let me find it, is a dimensional doorway. Let me see, where is that? Hang on a second
portals here. Or vortex or...
Yeah.
Window, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one explanation is a dimensional doorway. I'm trying to remember what is causing that. But he's suggesting time travel. All right, here we go. Mini black holes. This is from Wikipedia. Micro black hole. Micro black holes, also called quantum mechanical black holes or mini black holes, are hypothetical tiny black holes for which quantum mechanics effects play an important role. The concept that black holes may exist that are smaller than stellar masses, introduced in 1971 by Stephen Hawking. It is possible that such quantum primordial black holes were created in the high-density environment of the early universe or Big Bang, or possibly through subsequent phase transitions. This might be observed by astrophysicists through the particles they are expected to emit by Hawking radiation. Some hypotheses involving additional space dimensions predict that micro black holes could be formed at energies as low as the TeV range, whatever that is, which are available in particle accelerators such as the Large Hadron Collider. Popular concerns have then been raised over end-of-the-world scenarios. However, such quantum black holes would instantly evaporate, either totally or leaving on a very weakly interacting residue. Besides the theoretical arguments, the cosmic rays hitting the Earth did not produce any damage, although they reach energies in the range of hundreds of TeV. So that's some kind of quantum mechanical measurement of something, radiation, Hawking radiation. So there you go. So the idea is you've got many black holes or electromagnetic fields generated by massive amounts of quartz. So there you go.
Or
Danny.
at least two.
At least those two have some kind of theoretical basis to them that makes sense.
Right.
You know, you can just say, oh, it's a portal. Okay, what's a portal? I just gave you two potential answers there.
Right.
Right.
So,
When
Danny.
you say that, it's funny you say that because I believe we have window areas all over this planet. That,
we open up a window and it's a portal, ain't it?
Yeah.
There you go. It came in through the window.
Portal, I say
it went
window.
back out. Yep.
Thoughts, Danny?
Well, I'm no stranger to the idea of the vortex or anything, having one of those right here in Provo, Utah, but whenever someone sees something they can't explain, I'm always reminded of a quote that comes from, and I might be butchering this quote, but it comes from Bernard Hooverman, you know, the father of cryptozoology, as some like to call him, and he coined this term called the snare of mythification, which kind of described that as when someone sees something from a certain point of observation and they can't properly define what it is for whatever reason, either it being something unknown or a known animal that is so far or out of the eyesight enough where people can't really put the whole piece together, they start to add little pieces of the puzzle like Lego pieces, trying to create and reform what they think this might have been. And as I think about it over time, more fantastical aspects start being added to it. And I think a lot of things people are seeing could be that type of experience where people see something they can't define. And with our ancestors, our ancient ancestors, they'd be walking in the forest by themselves and they'd hear a stick or a twig, snap, but nothing there would cause it that they could see. And so they start adding some type of metaphysical, supernatural, or even, spiritual element to the causation of that. And with that area, they start to build archetypes and descriptions of things that could be in that area. And people take those descriptions and go, oh my gosh, that could actually be there. And by no means does this mean that I am not open-minded enough to think that there is something in Loch Ness or Lake Champlain or even Bigfoot. I saw something when I was 10 years old that I think was Bigfoot. But that could have been a 10-year-old boy's snare of mythification. So I think that there's all these possibilities, from wormholes or vortexes to living unknown animals to known animals misidentified, that all need to be brought to the table. And I don't think that as mortals we have no right and no ability to prove or say anything until we have something right in front of us. And that's why I think using folklore, the cooperation of folklore and science is something that needs to be utilized more in this area. Because, look at the pharmaceutical companies. They send out their explorers to talk to indigenous peoples to find cures or remedies for things that they use in their own indigenous areas. And they bring that back. Well, why aren't we taking the indigenous people's stories about the fauna in that area more seriously? Like Mkiwamembe. What is that thing? Is this strictly folklore, or is it a dinosaur? I don't think it's a dinosaur at all. I think that's complete fluff. I think my best guess would be, if it's something legitimate, it's some type of as yet unidentified large monitor lizard, similar to like the Komodo dragon, or even stretching farther, the Muggleania of Australia. But when you describe Mkiwamembe to someone, and someone who's never heard of it, they'll think it's a dinosaur. From the way it's described, you can describe that same thing, use those same descriptions, and also be describing a type of large monitor lizard. It's just wherever the imagination of the people want to go. And in most cases, people want to believe the most fantastic. Believe me, I want the creature of Loch Ness to be a plesiosaur. I want Lake Champlain to be a plesiosaur or something like that. I want Mkiwamembe to be a sauropod dinosaur. But look at the fossil record of Mkiwamembe's area. There are no sauropods in that area at all. None. There are no sauropod fossils found. So why don't cryptozoologists, start looking at other options besides that? Because if it's not in the fossil record, it can't be a physical or a brontosaurus or a potosaurus. It can't be, unless we have, over the decade, completely bypassed any sauropod dinosaurs in that area. You know what I mean? I think we need folklore and science need to cooperate better if we're ever going to get to the bottom of this. And that's kind of my goal, is to bring folklore and science together. for cooperation, because we're never going to go anywhere unless the scientists listen to the folklore and the folklorists start considering the science.
Well said. I agree with that. I agree with that. As a scientist, as a ufologist, I relate with the science and scientific method. As a paranormal historian, I relate with the history and the folklore and all that. And for me, I'm always trying to make sure both are incorporated, and I have a great deal of respect for both. I think, let's see, we got 2 minutes yet. So, yeah, my thoughts on Bigfoot, the cloaking, invisibility, that's an interesting notion. The portals is an interesting notion. Ghosts of cryptids, ghost of a Gigantopithecus, that could be it's plausible.
Green Man.
I'm not sold on the demonic thing, and I know Jennifer's not either, because people that do have Bigfoot reports or Bigfoot encounters they're not experiencing the same kind of things that we see in possession or oppression.
There are some creation.
There are exceptions to the rule.
Cryptozoologists that try to say that the Bigfoot are the Nephilim from the Bible.
Well, that's what. Yeah,
Chris just loves
cryptozoology. Fallen angels and the Nephilim being the offspring of.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Is it that time? Okay.
Yeah. All right, everybody. It is time for our next commercial break. You are listening to Paraversal Universe. We will be right back with our panel for the next segment.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back from the second break. This is Paraversal Universe on WBHM Digital Broadcasting, also heard on WCET-FM and the Rift Radio Network. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malek. Before we get back to the show, we want to tell you all that we are also on MeWe and Twitter. Our like and group pages on Facebook are under various headings as well. Having said that, go check out our Society's like page, the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited, as well as Jennifer's like page, Jennifer Malek, psychic demonologist. Leave a like if you like what you see. We always appreciate it. This segment is brought to you by the book Trail of the Sasquatch, A Shaman's Journey by cryptozoologist and Iroquois shaman Don Young, who is also a member of the NWPS. Check out his Facebook group pages, Kindred Forest and Indigenous Americas. Any comments for this week's show can be addressed in the chat room live. And let's get back to the show. This is Paraversal Universe, and we are talking paracryptozoology with cryptozoologist Scott Mardis, folklorist Danny B. Stewart, and Fortean researcher Steve Patrick Carrington. Alrighty. So, I think I'm going to shift gears here, unless anyone has any thoughts they'd like to share on Bigfoot yet.
Well, I'd like to add one little thing, if I could.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, if you look at it from a common sense point of view, Bigfoot can't be all over the United States, as some people claim, and be this elusive as a real animal. And I think the best case you've got for Bigfoot, Pacific Northwest, where the Patterson film was filmed and the best footprint evidence comes from. And I think that a lot of what might be going on other places could potentially be mass hallucination and psychological contamination, because you plant the idea that Bigfoot is out in the woods somewhere, and then you've got a whole bunch of people with expectant attention going into the woods. They may see a bear walking on its hind legs. They may find footprints where a bear has stepped with its front foot into, or stepped with its back foot into the same impression as its front foot and created a larger footprint. I think some of that may be going on some places, but that's just my opinion.
Stephen.
I find the case for Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest that you see in the Patterson film compelling, though.
Steve had brought up the point that Bigfoot is sighted in so many, different places, I think when you look at the sightings map, it's pretty clear that a lot of people, he's seen in multiple places around the world, and for many people, the Patterson-Gimlin film is the best evidence.
I agree.
For me, because I had a Bigfoot sighting in my life, which was a catalyst actually to form the society. That was one of the reasons. And so seeing one, I know they're real. The Patterson-Gimlin film, I'm on the fence on.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you seen the stabilized version? The MK Davis worked
Isn't that something? I mean, it's amazing footage. It's amazing footage.
That convinces me. It's something. I don't know what it is, but I mean, it's fascinating. I can just watch that thing over and over again and just go, wow, that is cool.
You look at it and it just screams real animal. Because I've never seen any special effects house.
Well,
even
if it is special effects, it's like
that.
the greatest hit ever. Because I mean,
for the special effects of 50 years ago, it's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, I saw the Minnesota Iceman when I was a kid in a mall in Gadsden, Alabama.
No kidding.
Oh, really?
In 1974, yes, absolutely.
30s? What? How old is that?
With my own eyes.
100 years BC?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know which one you saw? Because there were two versions. There was one that supposedly
Probably
was
the fake one. Some people think it was all fake.
Yeah.
The one I saw had to have been the fake one, because it was 1974. This would have been like 6 years after Heuvelmann's and Sanderson's examination of it. So I don't know.
Right.
Huh.
You know what's interesting about the Iceman too is me and Jennifer are currently working on an article, tattoos, in paranormal. And, of course, the oldest physical proof we have of tattoos is from the Iceman, because he's got tattoos. You see, 61.
I'm not talking about Otzi. I'm talking about the supposed Bigfoot carcass from Minnesota.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Okay, my mistake.
The carnival exhibit.
Okay, never mind. Okie doke. Well, yeah. So we have also. Oh, and the other thing is the mind speak. Some people claim that they're
communication.
In
and
parapsychology,
like
the best scientific evidence you have for any phenomena in parapsychology is ESP. So that's not beyond the pale.
Oh yeah, I don't
Human
think any of
beings
these
have ESP.
theories
There's
are.
no reason why some humanoid related to man couldn't have it as well. So that's not.
I think
too
that all
far
the
beyond
theories
the
we
pale.
have presented are plausible, and I think that there is science to back a lot of this stuff up. I mean, but let's go.
The further you go out on the fringe, the more you alienate the, the mainstream. So just bear that in mind.
Okay, well, since we talked a little bit about Nessie, why don't we go to Nessie next? And the paranormal or supernatural elements possibilities with Nessie would either be like a ghost of a plesiosaur, for example, or I know Aleister Crowley and others have done occult rituals, which
Crowley actually lived at Loch Ness for 17 years.
Yeah.
In a place called Boleskine House. And during the 1970s, Boleskine House was owned by Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. He later sold it. And it recently burned down.
Not too long ago.
Crowley apparently, there's a documentary called The Other Loch Ness Monster about Crowley's years at Boleskine House. And apparently he was working on some kind of big incantation or magic spell, and he got called away by one of his colleagues and didn't finish it. And the idea is just that whatever he conjured up and didn't finish with the spell the way it was supposed to go has lingered around the area. And some people want to connect that with the Loch Ness Monster.
But there's centuries of tradition about the Loch Ness creature, though.
Right.
Before that, too.
Well, the Kelpie, that's old news.
Yeah.
Kelpie and the water horse, Yeah, and then there's Willox the Warlock, who was a warlock that lived around Loch Ness back in the 1820s and 30s that claimed to have a bridle that he could control the water horse with. So, but, there's two ways you can take that. You can take that the water horse and the Kelpie are mythified versions of a real unknown animal living in Loch Ness, or you could take the stance that the Kelpie and the water horse were mythological creatures all along, and that the tradition of the modern Loch Ness Monster is a modernization of the Kelpie legend. So it's ambiguous.
All myths have a kernel of truth,
I think it does.
Legends
or I wouldn't be out there looking for Champ, and I'm sure Roland Watson wouldn't be out there looking for Nessie.
Well, they got a kernel or a mountain of truth, depending on, the creature.
It's on Loch Ness.
Say all they want about whether the Loch Ness flipper pictures were built on a computer or not, but the thing is, you look at the original unenhanced image, and you see an object that looks like a plesiosaur flipper according to modern reconstructions of what they think plesiosaur flippers look like. So
I can't get around that picture. That picture is that's like it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree. I mean, that's one piece of evidence for Nessie that is hard to get around.
Yeah.
Steve, are you with us?
Yeah.
Thoughts on Nessie, supernatural?
Is
it possible?
Yeah, it's possible. like I said, I'm very open-minded to this, the woo factor, that it could,
I can't hear you very well, Steve.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, it's possible, like I said, I myself would like it to be a real animal, and it's quite possible it could be. I'm thinking, something. It doesn't breathe air very often. If it is a reptile or something along the lines, and the lock is very deep. Even in silt and mud, it's probably a lot deeper than they even imagine. And I know a lot of people say, well, maybe it comes in through an underground tunnel or something that connects to the ocean, but that kind of gets written off. But because the lock would raise and lower, with the tide, and it's not, seawater, so that kind of counteracts that theory, I think. But other people think maybe when it comes down the canal, when it gets high enough, the water, and goes in and out at will. But to me, I would think somebody would see it more if it was doing, creatures were doing it that way, coming in and leaving the canal or something like that. But
recently Roland told me he's got like 8 reports from the River Ness.
Lately?
Yeah. Well, altogether over 80 years, but he's got 8 reports, so that's better than nothing. So.
And wasn't St. Columba's there too?
Somewhere near, they think, Bonaneros, where it goes into Loch Ness from the river.
That's what I heard too.
But,
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Like I said, I'm more to believe that Nessie is a flesh and blood animal than, say, Bigfoot. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I when I look at Loch Ness, I think that when you look at all the different kinds of possibilities, and there's so many, it's kind of like I liken it to the missing 411 mystery, and that could this be a little of everything going on?
Right.
Where a certain small, like if you had a pie chart, you have a piece that's misidentification, and a piece that is, perhaps even real. A piece that is this, a piece that is that, a piece that's supernatural. Topas, all these different ideas and theories. But again, if with all them different pieces, if there's, no matter how big or small, if there's a piece in there that's real, like the Nessie, then it's real. But what is it?
Right. Just like with this recent eDNA testing they did.
Right.
Coming up with the giant eel theory. Yeah, it's slimly possible, but the loch is filled with eels. So that all the DNA would account for, thousands of eels, not just one giant, And
right.
What percentage was inconclusive?
Yep.
Was it like 20%?
20 to 25% was unusable. It was either too fragmentary or contaminated.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're all waiting on the science paper to come out to get down to the hard, where the rubber meets the road, so we can't do anything until the paper comes out. So.
Yeah, because when you have that much, unanswered, and there are other points were made too. Like for instance, there are otter supposedly in the loch, but they didn't find any otter DNA.
And they found no otter DNA whatsoever, they found no seal
test wasn't
DNA.
the perfect test we were hoping for. Everyone was hoping for this perfect, undefinitive test.
The really disappointing part is they found absolutely no reptilian DNA whatsoever.
Yeah.
which seems to rule out at least a resident population of plesiosaurs.
Right.
That doesn't mean there's not plesiosaurs that come and go from the sea occasionally. So don't rule that out, But there are 3 reptiles that live in the vicinity of Loch Ness, and there should have been at least a little reptilian DNA there. So I don't know.
Okay, everybody. And why don't we continue this discussion after our next commercial break? You are listening to Paraversal Universe. We will be right back with our panel for the next segment.
The hand grenade testimony is out. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News. One of 2 transcripts released by impeachment investigators today is from Fiona Hill, the former White House aide who expressed concern to then National Security Advisor John Bolton about apparent back-channel efforts of the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, to get Ukraine to investigate corruption, including the Bidens.
She says, quote, his reaction was pain. This discussing the firing of Marie Yovanovitch, the former ambassador to Ukraine, who's going to come in for testimony next Friday. And basically he said, in fact, he directly said that Rudy Giuliani is a, quote, hand grenade, and he's going to blow everybody up. In fact, he made it clear that he didn't feel there was anything that he could personally do about this.
Fox's Chad Pergram in Washington. Today's other transcript is from National Security Council member Alexander Vindman. Republicans gearing up for the start of open hearings next week with a personnel shift on a key committee. Fox's Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill.
So we expected a change in the lineup on the GOP side of the House Intelligence Committee, and here it is from House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy tweeting, I am appointing Jim Jordan to the Intelligence Committee, which has now become the Impeachment Committee, where he will continue fighting for fairness and truth. Rep. Rick Crawford has been an exemplary member of the committee and will rejoin it when this Democrat charade is over.
Meantime, the acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, under subpoena to testify, became the latest no-show for a closed-door deposition today.
I don't want to give credibility to a corrupt witch hunt.
President Trump speaking to reporters earlier before heading to an Atlanta event that's about to begin now, the launch of a campaign initiative aimed at attracting black voters. The president also throwing some cold water on China's reported claims of a possible rollback of U.S. tariffs in the trade talks. The Dow's been down. America's listening to Fox News.
If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. That's the problem growing businesses have because of a hodgepodge of business systems. One for accounting, another for sales, another for inventory. If that's you, you know it's a mess that takes up too much time and too many resources. And that hurts the bottom line. You need NetSuite by Oracle, the cloud-based business management software that gives you the visibility and control you need to grow. With NetSuite, you save time, money, and unneeded headaches by managing sales, finance and accounting, orders, and HR instantly from your desktop or phone. That's why NetSuite is the world's #1 cloud business system. Companies that use NetSuite grow 3 times faster than the S&P 500. And right now, NetSuite is offering you valuable insights with a free guide, 7 key strategies to grow your profits at netsuite.com/Fox. That's netsuite.com/Fox to download your free guide, 7 key strategies to grow your profits. netsuite.com/Fox.
Former Vice President Joe Biden becoming the latest candidate to file the paperwork for the first-in-the-nation primary in New Hampshire. Fox's Peter Ducey in Concord.
Within minutes of him filing, a lot of the questions upstairs were about Michael Bloomberg getting into the race. Now that the Bloomberg team is telling us that if Bloomberg makes it official and decides that he wants to be a presidential candidate, it's because he doesn't think anybody running could possibly beat President Trump in a general election. So the former VP was asked about that.
I welcome in the race. Michael's a solid guy, and let's see where it goes. I have no problem with him getting in the race. And in terms of he's running because of me, last polls I looked at, I'm pretty far ahead.
Bloomberg, the former New York City mayor, rethinking his decision earlier this year not to run. Meantime, Andrew Yang also filing his New Hampshire paperwork.
Independents have been waiting for a campaign that energized them and spoke to them and talked about the real problems they're seeing on their main streets and in their communities every day. And I think independents are going to come out for Andrew Yang here in New Hampshire and around the country.
Yang says Bloomberg is entitled to his opinion. The Secretary of State taking shots at Russia and China as Germany marks 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Speaking in Berlin, Mike Pompeo criticizing Vladimir Putin's Russia.
Today, Russia, led by a former KGB officer stationed in Dresden, invades its neighbors and slays political opponents.
And saying China suppresses its people using tactics
that would be horrifyingly familiar to former East Germans.
Amid strains in relations between the US and Europe, Pompeo urging unity.
We must recognize that free nations are in competition of values with those unfree nations.
In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
An hour to the close on Wall Street, the Dow's down 47 points. This is Brady. This is Fox News.
This news report is brought to you by NetSuite by Oracle, the cloud-based business management software that gives you the visibility and control you need to grow. NetSuite is offering their free guide, 7 Key Strategies to Grow Your Profits, at netsuite.com/Fox.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Paraversal Universe. Now in our second hour, produced by WB. You can always enjoy excellent fringe talk radio for awesome and informative radio shows about the paranormal, supernatural, esoteric, and Fortean topics on this network and affiliate platform websites. Not only our show, but many other good shows about different facets of the unknown and unexplained. Much to listen to and much to enjoy. Stream live on TuneIn, iTunes, and the Paranormal Livestream app, available from Android app and iTunes Store. And this segment is brought to you by the Supernatural Magazine, where our articles can be read. All right, back to Paraversal Universe, and we are talking paracryptozoology with cryptozoologist Scott Mardis, folklorist Danny B. Stewart, and Fortean researcher Steve Patrick Carrington. All right, so where did we leave off?
Still on Loch Ness.
Okay, let's continue.
Well, I was going to end that part off with saying also this creature that has been witnessed and seen over the decades, the original Nessie could have died off. We don't, from how long it's been there. It obviously could have a breeding population, and it finally died off. We don't know. But and what people are seeing now could be multitude of things, because I don't think we've really had a really good first-class sighting in quite a while.
Well, has there ever been an actual photograph of something with a long neck that's actually been legitimate, ever, of any lake? I don't think there has.
I would say you've got the Manzi photograph.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
You've got the Bodette video from Lake Champlain. You've got the Rhines underwater photograph that shows what appears to be a long neck, the front part of the body, and 2 flippers. And some people, including me, question the hoax allegations about the surgeon's photograph. There's a lot of holes in that story. So.
Yes, a lot of saying that the hoax was a hoax.
Exactly.
So that kind of throws a monkey wrench into that, too. So I don't count that totally out either.
Well, with Loch Ness, to me, I think the best case scenario for a living specimen would be like the large eel hypothesis and a type of unknown salamander hypothesis, with, Roy Mackal talked about a lot of it. Those are my 2 favorite ones. But when you talk about the folklore of Loch Ness, you got to realize that you're steeped in the middle of Fey lore. And the fairy traditions in that area could have easily built, the archetypes that people are going to be experiencing there. And they're seeing something, again, with the snare mythification, they're seeing something in that loch. And they're going to attach the folklore of the fairy legends onto that. So like with Undine, that type of thing. So I just always like to look at the folklore around that area and what could have built onto what people were seeing. And I think you're absolutely right when talking about something that could have died off. And that's been like a culprit for many types of things, like with the Russian black unicorn, which was seen running around the Russian steppes. Our ancestors supposedly saw this thing before it died out, and then and they saw, and then that built upon the folklore of the Russian black unicorn, which was like a type of a Elasmotherian or woolly rhinoceros before it died out completely. So how many of these things were lingering prehistoric survivors and then died out, but the folklore kept them alive?
Well, you've also got cases that are well documented of ancient peoples finding fossils and not knowing what they were and assuming them to be living animals and also misinterpreting them. That they believed that the legend of the Cyclops was started by the discovery of elephant skulls, because you look at an elephant skull where the trunk normally goes and it looks like a giant eye socket.
Well, Adrian Mayer has wrote a lot about the Griffin folklore and the connection with the Protoceratops.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The name for the field is geomythology.
You know, there are other lakes in the area, locks or whatnot, that also have legends and a lot of folklore and history to it concerning, you know, water entities.
Yep. Well, I would say that a lot of primitive people, most notably the Native Americans, gave real animals that we all know, such as beavers and wolves and all that, gave them supernatural abilities in their oral traditions. So just because an animal in some oral tradition of primitive people has been given supernatural powers doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't a real animal behind the mythification.
Right. Yeah, and that's interesting, and that's a good point.
Well, here in Utah, we have Utah Lake that has water baby traditions from the Ute Native Americans.
I've heard of it.
You know, those things are supposed to be creepy as hell, but not only anyone's ever actually saw one, but the folklore still lingers in that area. And I'll be honest with you, when I go down there, Utah Lake is a creepy place. I mean, it's just bizarre in and of itself. I mean, I walked across that lake when I was 10 years old. It gets so shallow, but there's still like bodies that stuck there no one's ever found. So it's just like, it's cursed. It's weird. It's fun to guys.
Try spending the night on Lake Champlain in total darkness.
Oh yeah.
Try that one.
All right.
I'm
down.
The same place that the Bodette video was filmed all night.
I'm down.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears here, and let's there's two other cryptids I'd like to cover yet in this interview. Next one would be Mothman, and you know, and Mothman is definitely you know, black, flying, red eyes, you know. And then you got like different. Now you have different. You have the older Mothman stories, and then like the Owlman across the seas. That you know, that kind of similar.
From Cornwall.
And then you got this. Well, then you had the Wisconsin Mothman sightings, and then you had this newer rash of, you know, the sightings, the alleged sightings in Chicago. So. And we've actually here at Paracryptozoology Universe have interviewed 5 of the people that have been investigating this, and there's you know, it's really interesting. That in itself is content for books and whatnot. Yeah. But you know, aside from all that, the Mothman, right? So, and the original Mothman had police reports, had UFO stuff going on, had all
Men
kinds
in
of
Black, Injured Cold, all kinds of weird things.
Yeah.
When I think of Mothman, I think right of Keel, because he was right in the middle of all of it. Mm-hmm. And like Scott said, we even had MIB reports, you know, of people being threatened, you know, for talking about it, and UFOs sighted in the area at the same time. I mean, we had pretty much everything going that could, woo going at that time during
I don't believe there is woo. I believe woo is just something that we don't understand. We don't have the scientific framework to understand it yet. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying, I believe everything ultimately has a scientific explanation, but in order to understand it, we have to have a theoretical framework that makes sense in order to understand it.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I have a question for all of you to answer from the chat room. And the question is, do the panel members believe in the Chicago Birdman?
Well, that would be the Chicago Mothman under a different name. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Well, there are so many different sightings of different things like a flying human all over the world, all with just different names. I mean, Provo has the gigantic flying black manta ray. I figured out what that thing was.
Yeah.
I know what that thing was, and I'll tell you later, but I mean, they're all over the place. People are seeing things that look like flying humanoids. They just have different names.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem that I touched on earlier with mass hallucination and psychological contamination. This stuff really happens. All the things that the skeptics tell you are true, but not for everything, I don't think.
Oh, yeah.
They would have you believe that everything that people see falls under that blanket explanation. But here's how this works. I go to a lake somewhere, say a reservoir, a man-made reservoir, and I go and I tell somebody, oh, I saw a monster in the reservoir. Then the next thing you know, there's a bunch of people that are looking at the reservoir looking for a monster. Yeah. And they see a boat wake, or they see wind blowing on the lake making a disturbance, and then their mind is prepared to see a monster, and they see one. And the human mind, memory does not work like a videotape. Memories it's well documented among psychologists that memories change over time, and you can make a suggestion to somebody. Somebody saw something they couldn't identify, and then you go and tell this impressionable person, oh, you saw the monster that lives in such and such reservoir, and in their mind, the memory mutates into a monster. This is well documented.
Well, yeah. Well, when I first started my ghost tours, when I was still teaching at Utah University, I would take a whole group of my students once every semester on a ghost walk. And I would take them to Provo Cemetery and have them all lined up around the outside cemetery. And I'd plant one of my students to say, what was that? And someone would do that, and everyone would see something. And I did that on several times when I was teaching. And then I stopped doing it because I felt it was counterproductive to what my real intent was. But that's a perfect example. I saw something, what was that? And everyone else, not everyone, but a good number of them, all thought they saw something moving in that same general area where the other student pointed.
You plant the idea that there's something there, people will see it because they want to see it.
Well, that's one of the explanations out there.
That's why you're better off in cryptozoology, parapsychology, all these fields, of putting the emphasis on tangible evidence, photographs, recordings.
Well, a good investigator does. It's unfortunately,
but
you have so many.
A lot of them don't,
I know. I know.
Most of them don't.
Right.
What material evidence do you have for Dogman?
Well, I would present everything on Cynocephalus. I do a whole lecture just on the ancient history of Cynocephalus, or Cynocephalus.
Dog-headed people, I'm familiar with it.
Right,
yeah.
Right. All the different, be it from biblical or, different books from antiquity. There's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of different stuff. Different historians, different explorers.
But I think
the information's out there.
In the modern era, what physical or tangible...
And that's the other thing, too.
Do you have?
If there were cases where there were evidence, I would suggest that stuff is also covered up by our government. And I think that for those times where there might be evidence, I think that gets swept under the rug as often as possible as they can get away with. I think it's just policy. I think there's a lot of stuff that just happens that we'll never hear about.
Right.
I think it's counterproductive to our goal to bring conspiracy theories into this, though, because every time you bring up conspiracy theories, you're always labeled as like a kook. I'm not saying that it's not helpful in some cases, but
a lot of
really,
people call it special pleading too.
Well, let's call it conspiracy analysis, okay?
Yeah.
Because the conspiracy to hide evidence, and we know it's happening. So I mean, it's not like it doesn't exist. And I think most of the people listening to this program, have a good, they understand that and the thing about conspiracies is you break down the unknown and unexplained. One of those categories is conspiracies. Conspiracies, crimes, and corruption.
Right. And we can continue this conversation after our next commercial break. You are listening to Paraversal Universe. We will be right back with our panel for the next segment.
Welcome back to WBHM.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Several U.S. presidents are on record talking about the UFO mystery.
Yeah, Presidents Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan both had UFO sightings of their own, but the current presidential campaign might be the first in which UFO disclosure has been championed by a major party candidate.
DIA, CIA, it moves around, is operating a program to train psychic spies to spy and use their powers against Russia. John Ronson writes about this in The Men Who Stare at Goats.
The first known sighting of a ghost took place right after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in the late 1860s during the administration of Ulysses Grant.
Project Paperclip, Clinton releases it all in 1998.
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
I say, do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial.
It's a place where UFO hunters and scientists gather to examine paranormal activity in the region.
Some of the documents, this is bringing Nazi scientists into the United States to work here. So we fought against the Nazis, and it's not, this again is not a revelation. As early as 1947, 1946, we knew some of this, right?
On the paranormal, will we see U.S. President Barack Obama's foreign policy go intergalactic in a quest for gold stolen by aliens? We'll tell you at least how the White House responded to claims the chief executive has been teleporting to Mars. So let's get to today's Capitol account.
UFOs, hauntings, psychic abilities, conspiracy, ESP, cryptozoology. There are many things that remain unexplained in the inexplicable world around us, and we're talking about them here, looking for answers on WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama. The truth is out there.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Paraversal Universe, produced by WBHM Digital Broadcasting, also heard on the Rift Radio Network and on the airwaves at WCET-FM. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malek. Our new book, Paraversal Universe, Decade of Diligence, experiences, cases, and insights from the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited. Should be out in 2 weeks. In fact, the final transcribing will be done tomorrow. So look for that. We're excited about that. And we're excited to share some of the stuff that we can talk about with everybody. So this segment is brought to you by the Parasociology like page on Facebook. Parasociology is the study of how paranormal manifestations and experiences can affect a family, group, or collective. Parasociology also examines how spirituality is practiced in different cultures. So go check that out if you get a chance, and leave a like for future content. All right, back to the show. This is Paraversal Universe, and we are talking about cryptozoology and paranormal possibilities and paracryptozoology. And we have cryptozoologist Scott Mardis, folklorist Danny B. Stewart, and Fortean researcher Steve Patrick Carrington. And we had just touched on Dogman, and before that, we were talking about Mothman. And, the idea, like, Mothman is one of those creatures that's almost more supernatural with a lot of the way things are explained for the legitimate cases. And if that should even be a cryptid, or if that shouldn't be classified as something else. But be that as it may, it's in cryptozoology. It's been cited in different places. Just basically flying humanoid, black, whether it be bird or owl. Steve, what are your thoughts on Mothman?
Well, at the time of the original Mothman reports, of course, they were putting up, the theories that, maybe it's a crane people are seeing, or a large owl, which, but maybe possibly for a couple accounts, but that doesn't explain glowing red eyes and a creature that stands taller than a man, It doesn't cut it, as something like a normal bird. To me, I would say it was more, as Keel would have said, the Mothman kind of displayed prankster behavior. It wanted to be seen, then it could disappear. To me, it was more in the woo factor as compared to something flesh and blood. It just didn't fit any known description, like I said, of a crane or an owl or anything of that nature. That's how I feel about that.
Some people believe Mothman is the fallen angel, some demonic.
Well, it's like, I want to interject this really quick, not to touch on this one for too long, but look at the Jersey Devil. People seem to think that that's demonic too. And I say that only because there's only one of them. There's never been more than one of them. And when people have sightings, they describe this thing as looking literally demonic.
Yeah, that's a good
I'm
point.
willing to bet that was a escaped kangaroo. That's where my bet is on the Jersey Devil. Personal collection, escaped kangaroo.
I was thinking it was a hammerhead bat. And
well,
so many,
there is a theory that's popped up by Brian Regal in the last couple of years that he traced back that the Leeds family wrote an almanac back in the late 1600s or early 1700s or somewhere in there, and got in a rivalry with another almanac, and that the other almanac accused them of being Satanists or something along those lines. I can't remember off the top of my head, and that is the true origin of the story of the Jersey Devil. So,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, if you'll look up on academia.edu, there's an article that Brian Regal wrote called "The Real Jersey Devil" that goes into all the details. So.
Yeah, and the other idea too is, is like showing up before disasters. Those kinds of things. That to me sounds ominous.
Yeah.
One thing that goes against this political theory that Brian Regal has is the fact that the Indians in Illinois had an animal monster that was exactly like the Jersey Devil called the Piasa, which they made a big rock painting of on the Alton, Illinois part of the Mississippi River, if you ever heard of the Piasa bird. And it's identical to the Jersey Devil in all respects. And
how do you spell that?
Piasa, Piasa.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
So
okay, now I know what you mean.
There's one argument that you could say, well, the Jersey Devil goes back further than this political theory that Brian Regal's come up with. So I don't know. They're both very impressive arguments. So.
Yeah, the Jersey Devil and the Mothman, another thing they have in common, Jen pointed out, is that there's no breeding family unit.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I think one of the, I can't remember how many, Wisconsin sightings, I believe, had a couple involved.
The classic description
but
of
usually
what the
they're just
Jersey
by
Devil
themselves. Right.
is supposed to look like is about 4 feet tall with a horse's head, bat wings, and a long tail with a point on the end of it, which sounds vaguely pterosaurian. So.
Or chupacabrian.
Yeah.
Certainly something unusual. And, yeah, both of them are just, without, like you said, breeding family unit and just bizarre, and who knows? I think that I wonder about some of the stuff they're doing at CERN,
Yeah, true.
and trying to open dimensions, and who knows what they're doing. And, of course, you find out that all the people that work there are in the occult and everything else, and they're having secret ceremonies.
If you really go digging, you can find Sasquatch reports where they talk about it was wearing clothes, it was talking to people, it knew the English language. There are crazy reports out there. There's also crazy reports of Bigfoot molested me and all kinds of crazy stuff. So obviously, you've got to go through the database and weed out the white noise.
Yes.
Absolutely. And this applies to all of the claims of the paranormal. My position is if you make a paranormal claim, you have a burden of evidence to provide, proof of your claim.
Extraordinary
works,
claims need extraordinary evidence.
Exactly. That's Sagan's dictum.
Yeah. Well, and continuing with the Mothman accounts, we'd also have to probably bring up that a lot of people believe in a curse with a chief.
Oh, Cornstalk.
Cornstalk.
Yeah. He was murdered.
That he put a curse. He was murdered, and he put a curse on the area. And a lot of people think that's where Mothman was spawned from.
Steve, how far are you from the Barrens?
What's that?
How far are you from the Pine Barrens in New Jersey?
Quite a ways.
Yeah. Are you closer to the Ohio?
What's that?
You're in Delaware?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know you're in New England.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm in.
I used to live close to the Barrens. I was in Philadelphia for 5 years.
I'm down near the Dover Demon area.
Yep.
Yes, Dover Demon.
And the White Mountains.
Yep.
Well, we had
Betty and Barney Hill happened.
Yep.
As a ufologist, I just want to say really quick that when you look at all the different possible species that have been presented in ufology, both from America and across the ocean, the idea that there could be, there's like 100 and some different alien potential alien species governments claim are visiting the Earth, hypothetically, right?
Yep.
So the chance that just even one of them may look like a Bigfoot, to me, is if we do have different species visiting us, if they're sentient, if they're similar to us, head, 2 arms, 2 legs, whatever, then I could totally see that. Does that explain? Am I saying that all Bigfoots are aliens that look like Bigfoots? No, certainly not. Could a very small percentage be something like that? Perhaps, but I wouldn't rule it out because I
There's
don't
a book
know for sure.
of this guy named Patrick Huig called The Guide to Extraterrestrials, which he's broken down into different categories, and one of them even looks like a centaur. It's got 4 legs and an upright front part of the body with arms.
Yeah.
So I don't know where these reports came from, but you got a lot of really, if you really dig, you got a lot of crazy stuff out there. Like me and Steve were talking recently about this thing that happened in the 1950s where the little green men gave the guy a pancake. And I saw where he was on.
That was up here. That was like 30 miles from here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, anyway, I saw a documentary that was made in England back in the 1960s where they had the guy on the program with the pancake. Seriously.
It was in Wisconsin. That must have been cheese then.
No, we have a case in Eagle River where a man claims to have basically seen a UFO, and he had an interaction with a being, and the being gave him a pancake.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah,
that's I think, or late 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just like 30 minutes away from here.
Yep.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Case. Yeah. Pretty cool stuff. And, I also agree. Like, anytime you have cryptozoology and ufology kind of mixing, or cryptozoology and parapsychology mixing, or cryptozoology and demonology mixing, that's definitely a case for paracryptozoology, which is just cryptozoology.
When I was growing
abnormal.
up in the 1970s, there was basically cryptozoology, ufology, and parapsychology, and they were all kind of neatly broke up into 3 different categories. And you had cryptozoology, where it said, well, we're looking for unknown animals that we haven't found yet that may be prehistoric survivors, like the Loch Ness Monster might be a plesiosaur, Bigfoot might be some kind of relic hominoid. And then in ufology, you have the explanation, well, they're visitors from outer space visiting our planet from other planets. And then in parapsychology, you had people see apparitions and their survival of dead people. And those answers all kind of made sense. And then people started mixing and matching, and everything got all messed up.
Well, I tell you, when you look back, it's all connected. There are cases where...
That's what John Keel said, but that's really no answer. I mean, I'm not saying... I like John Keel's books, too, but just saying it's all has no answers is no answer. We need to be looking for answers that make sense.
That's what we're trying to do. I mean, that's the whole idea.
Well, I know, but some people aren't. They're just,
Right. Regurgitating.
They just like the stories and they don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the problem is when these people that don't care are trying to pass themselves off as serious researchers, because they're not. They're just perpetuating stories.
Well, that's why we have to start looking at, when we normalize this topic, we have to actually start publicizing the discoveries that turn out to be mundane, so that they see that we are actually pushing that forward. Because, look, we have this thing in Provo called the gigantic flying black manta ray. I'm not going to go over the whole story, but I was studying this thing from 2013 to 2019. And I've been collecting people seeing this thing over and over again. They're seeing this gigantic 20-foot wide by 20-foot long black flying manta ray flying across the sky in Provo. Well, it turns out that there was this, it was like a big group of bats that had been collecting the top of the hospital in Provo. And when people would see it fly over this large group of bats, that may have taken the form of a giant manta ray. But for years, people swore they were actually seeing a gigantic flying black manta ray, something similar to the Mothman or whatever. But we have an answer to that, what it more than likely is now. So we need to bring that to the surface so people will look at us and go, hey, they're not just looking for monsters, they're looking for real answers. They're open to the most mundane, to the most fantastic at the same time. And too many of us are looking for that dinosaur in the lake. And that's all they're talking about. And it makes all of us look like idiots. It just takes one person constantly looking for a dinosaur to make the rest of us serious researchers look like complete morons. And there is one of our main problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a book that came out not too long ago that disappointed me because up until that point I considered that person to be, I was just, I guess sometimes we assume that other people are doing due diligence the way we try. And to find out, that wasn't the case. And basically, at what point does it become Reddit when, nothing is looked into? And when it is looked into and found out to be, hey, this isn't true, this is fabricated or made up or half true or whatever.
Well, that's why you have in science, you have the referee process. Somebody who wants to publish a scientific paper, it's run through a referee process where other people knowledgeable in the field look at it and decide whether it's worthy to be published in a science journal or not.
Yes.
And we need more of a referee process in cryptozoology investigations, parapsychology investigations, and ufology investigations. It all needs to be put through that process.
We need cryptozoology peer reviewship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to have that before the International Society of Cryptozoology went belly up. I was a member of it. They published their own journal. They had referees and everything. And then the society went belly up, and the principal people, Roy Mackle, Richard Greenwell, Bernard Hewlins, they all died. And now there's no cryptozoology police. I wish there was. But we have to police ourselves,
Well, let's all go to law enforcement school, whatever it is. Let's get this started. It's up to us to be the police now.
All right, everybody. And with that, it is time for our next commercial break. You are listening to Paraversal Universe Radio. We will be back with our panel for the next segment.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 45 minutes after the hour.
Alrighty, we're back, everyone. This is Paraversal Universe, produced by WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Also heard on WCET-FM and the Rift Radio Network. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malek. And we're glad you're with us, as always. There are some Facebook group pages we'd like for you to check out. The Ultimate Conspiracies group page is one, which is dedicated to conspiracies, crimes, and corruption. Also check out Lake Monstrosities, dedicated to aquatic mysteries and wonder. And we should also point out the Zombie Plesiosaur Society and Anomalous Universe. Check those groups out. Feel free to join them. We'd love to see you there. Each of these networks mentioned has a group and like page on Facebook as well. So go check those out for upcoming content. This segment is brought to you by the 5-star Reader's Choice Award-winning epic fantasy trilogy Helm by Robert L. Malek. And back to the show. We are talking about paracryptozoology on Paraversal Universe. And we are, this is our last segment. We have Scott Mardis, Danny B. Stewart, and Steve Patrick Carrington with us. So, with this last segment, I'd like to take half of this last segment. And, Scott, you could dive a little bit into the remote viewing and the
well, you touched on the idea earlier that the Loch Ness Monster and other creatures like that could be the ghost of a plesiosaur. And there is an anecdotal story, which you have multiple sources to back it up. Explain to me exactly who Jim Mars was. He's deceased now.
He's
historian.
He's most famous.
Theorist.
Yep. Most famous.
Well, anyway, he's one source of the story, and the other source is a guy that used to be on Coast to Coast AM quite a bit, named Major Ed Dames, who was supposedly actively involved in the CIA's remote viewing program. And the story is that Bill Clinton asked the remote viewing team to investigate the Loch Ness Monster with remote viewing. In doing so, they claim to have seen creatures in Loch Ness that looked like plesiosaurs, but that materialized and dematerialized on several occasions as they were watching them. And they came to the conclusion that they thought that the Loch Ness Monster manifestations were the ghosts of plesiosaurs, which were supposed to have been extinct for 66 million years, according to conventional geology. So,
you know, one of the theories out there is the veil theory, or the hole in the veil theory. I just wonder if the veil isn't really thin at Loch Ness. Especially when we talk about Crowley, and then you got the castle, that's out on the peninsula there. It looks all mysterious, and I'm sure they had some unusual doings, during its prime, and who knows who else has been out there trying to summon stuff or this or that. But just the fact that maybe just by geographical whateverness, ley lines or geomagnetic energy or whatever. That
well-known investigator of Loch Ness, Ted Holliday, had a lot of thoughts along those same lines and tried to connect lake monsters with sightings of UFOs. He wrote several books along those lines.
You mean Frederick William?
Particularly The Dragon and the Disc.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should also mention Tony Doc Shields, too.
Yeah, well,
zoology.
He's a stage professional magician, so part of his modus operandi is to fool people, and he's more or less confessed that his Nessie photographs are fake, so it's very ambiguous. Take it as you want to. I have no faith in it.
The reason I brought him up is just because in the past, he was one who would discuss the idea openly, just different ideas. That's why I brought him up. I mean, to me, but yeah, you're right. And unfortunately, again, just like I was talking about with that book, sometimes we get let down, and that's just...
This book you're talking about, what's it about specifically?
I would rather not say on air. I'll tell you after.
Right. As you know, I have my secrets too. So.
Yeah.
It's no big secret. Anybody that really knows me knows I have people that I have problems with too. So there you go.
So let's take the last little bit here. First of all, let me thank all you guys. You guys are awesome.
Well, thank you for having us on.
Yes.
All three of you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and we enjoyed everybody's thoughts and views and opinions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the first thing we could do is take a couple minutes and just talk about any pages we have, any groups we have, any contact information we'd like to share, any events, anything like that. And why don't we start with Steve?
Sure. As you mentioned earlier, I have the group Anomalous Universe, and that pretty much covers anything anomalous and any mystery and anything that's unexplained. So, and I also have a smaller blog on Facebook called Thoughts of a Fortean Researcher. And I also help run Cryptozoologists United. So those are the three groups I'm pretty much, with. I'm also with Scott's group. I help administrate that one. And I help administrate Kevin's. So I'm quite busy.
Yes, at Lake Monstrosities.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And Scott.
Yep.
And so, yeah, and Scott, how about you?
Well, I have several Facebook groups and pages. The most prominent one is the Zombie Plesiosaur Society. Then I have CHAMP, Lake Champlain Monster Research by Scott Mardis and William Dragenis Facebook group. Then there's one for the paranormalists called the Ghost Plesiosaur Society. Then for the skeptics is the Lake Monster Skeptical Forum. And then there's a page I started in 2011 called Lake Champlain Mystery Animals. I have a book out on Amazon called Night of the Living Dead Plesiosaurs, a digital-only book. And I'm supposed to be appearing in a documentary sometime next year called Science Friction, about how experts are brought on television programs and re-edited and misquoted. So I will be appearing on that. And that is supposed to be on Netflix sometime next year.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And for those listening, you can catch Scott also on Monster Quest, the very first episode of Monster Quest featured Mr. Scott Mardis.
Yep.
So,
I missed that show.
yeah, you need to bring that back.
Mm.
And Danny.
Yes. I own and operate the original Provo, Utah Ghost Tour, and you can find me on Facebook under that same moniker. There's also I have a Facebook page, Danny B. Stewart, focuses on my personal research. I write for Utah Stories Magazine, so if you look up Utah Stories Magazine, Danny B. Stewart, you can find a lot of articles about Utah local folklore and strange events. These are all events I've found and things I've found. I don't regurgitate or Google any of this. This is all stuff I've personally researched and stumbled upon. On December 3rd, I'll be giving a talk at Utah University Science Department on the cooperation of science and folklore. That'll be in a science building in room 260. And then December 12th, I'll be giving a talk at the Orem Public Library on Christmas folklore titled Scary Ghost Stories and Tales of the Glories, where I'll be focusing on lost Christmas and Yule and solstice traditions. And yeah, it's going to be some fun stuff. I'm also working on the Made in Utah festivals with Utah Stories Magazine, and we'll be having a very large festival coming up this December, focusing on Utah local folklore and traditions and made goods.
Sweet. And one thing I'd like to plug is the Paracryptozoology like page on Facebook, which is adminned by myself, Jennifer, and Don Young. And there is a whole host of information pertaining to the topics we were talking about on the show. Different articles by different paranormal professionals, different scientists, different cryptozoologists, and different fields. And the thing with paracryptozoology is that because it is open to ideas that are out of the norm, at least. So, yes, go check that out. It's really interesting. Like it for future content. Looks like we got all of that out of the way, and we still have 5 minutes left. So, closing thoughts. What's that?
I was going to mention it to Danny. He's in Utah, right?
Yeah. Provo, Utah.
I don't know if you want to answer this or not. What's your thought on the skinwalker phenomena?
Everyone asks me that. And my response is I don't really have a response because I haven't spent a lot of time looking into it, simply because there's not really, I haven't found any real solid information that I think is valuable. And I have several Native American friends that I have spoke to, and they've promised me, I've promised them not to talk about what they've shared with me if they shared with me. So I have some interesting stories from their reservations, but nothing that I am privy to share out of respect, a promise I made.
Understood.
Yeah. But let me tell you this though. What they have shared with me is very convincing, and very few things creep me out, and it certainly creeped me out a little bit.
Yeah, I've heard that not just the Skinwalker Ranch per se. Of course, everyone focuses on that, but that there's a whole area, around there, and for miles that is just like paranormal infested. With apparitions, ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs, everything. To me, it sounds like another window or portal area.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We're talking with Trey Hudson, parapsychologist, who has identified another area with some solid scientific research, I might add. And we just did that show, was it a couple months ago? It was really fascinating. What else was I was going to say something else. I can't remember. And, geez. Okay. I don't remember. I apologize that we didn't get to the dogmen, the werewolves, shape-shifting, and cynocephalus.
That's where we need to do a part 2.
Part 2.
Part 2 is coming up. Yes, we'll do part 2 in February. We'll book that. We'll make that happen. It will be fun. And it'll be awesome.
I'm very skeptical of the existence of Santa Claus. I think 90% of the sightings are
right?
Santa Claus is a nature spirit.
You're getting coal. You're getting coal.
Santa Claus and Satan. They both wear red. Have you ever seen them together?
No.
No.
I don't believe in the tooth fairy either.
Better hope there are no kids listening to this.
Don't get me started on Santa. We need 2 full episodes for that.
Right.
It's a topic I'm quite obsessed with.
Or Krampus.
There you go.
Actually, I can think of one place that Satan and Santa have been seen together. The Mexican Santa Claus versus the Devil movie that's on YouTube.
I have not heard of this.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look it up.
Santa Claus, 1959. It's hilarious.
Not to be confused with Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
No, there's another good one. But the
Beautiful
absolute best one, though, the best one is Santa Claus and the Ice Cream Bunny. You've got to see that at least once.
I've never even heard of that.
Okay, on that note, we're going to wrap this up. we'd like to thank our panel for being so informative and awesome. You guys rock.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
That's what I do.
All right. Yes, and we'll do a part 2. And we will be back next week. Feel free to support any of the networks mentioned here tonight, as well as the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited, 501c3 nonprofit organization, by donating. It's folks like you who ensure these excellent organizations will be here tomorrow. I believe we have Richard Sennett next week. Anyways, we'll be back next week. So, to the believer, the evidence is overwhelming.
And to the skeptic, there will never be enough.
Thank you. Good night. God bless you. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you here next time.
Good night, everyone.
Toodles.
Night, guys.
Good night.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Radio brings you The Haunted Sea with host Scott Mardis.
Hello, this is Scott Mardis. Welcome to another episode of The Haunted Sea. Today's episode is a follow-up to a panel discussion that we had on another show called Paraversal Universe, hosted by the late, great Kevin Malek. We had a 2-hour discussion discussing the pros and cons of paranormal approaches to the investigation of cryptozoological entities. And at the end of that program, we discussed the fact that we didn't get to everything we wanted to discuss and would like to do a follow-up. The original plan was to do it on Kevin and Jennifer's show, and unfortunately in December of last year, Kevin passed away. So this show is basically a tribute to him and on the follow-up to the previous show. And joining me today for this are the surviving participants of the previous program, and that would include Jennifer Malek. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
And Steve Patrick Carrington of the Facebook group Anomalous Universe. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Scott.
And Danny B. Stewart, Utah folklorist. Hello, Danny.
Hey, how's it going?
So, as I said before, we want to dedicate this show to 2 people that have since passed. The late, great Kevin Malek, who was a very dear friend of all of us, and we miss him very much. And also another friend, Jeff Stantz, who was killed in a boating accident on Lake Michigan about a month ago. So we remember our friends, and hopefully today we can do them proud by continuing this interesting discussion that we had on the previous show. Basically, most people approach cryptozoology from the standpoint that we're looking for an unknown biological animal. And usually in most cases that makes sense because some of the creatures that cryptozoology is looking for are known to have gone extinct in the recent past. Things like the thylacine from Australia, the moa in New Zealand. I mean, these are animals that have gone extinct in historic times. So finding a lost population of something like that would not be beyond the pale of acceptability. Then beyond that, you get into things like the ideas of surviving ground sloths from the Ice Age, surviving saber-toothed tigers, things that are both supposed to have been extinct for, say, thousands of years as opposed to decades or 100 years, which, again, that's another level of acceptability, but it's not that outlandish. Then going beyond that, you have things like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, which some people, and Mokele Mbembe, which some people suggest are animals that have survived for tens of millions of years beyond their presumed extinctions. We're talking about things from the age of the dinosaurs, from 60 million years ago. And Gigantopithecus itself is supposed to have been extinct for around 1 million years. So, you know, again, we're talking about animals that we know once existed, even though it's millions of years ago. You know, all we're talking about is they have survived beyond their presumed extinction when they fell out of the fossil record, which is, you know, to a paleontologist, the idea that these animals have survived for all these tens of billions of years is a stretch, but it's not anything beyond the possibility of what we know in the material universe, because we already have a precedent, the coelacanth. Now, what we're talking about today are approaches to answer these mysteries that go beyond biology. We're talking about things that question what we know about physics and the accepted material universe, which has taken it out of the realm of biology and putting it into the metaphysical. And a lot of people have problems with that. So, Jennifer, as somebody that has a lot of grounding in parapsychology and things of that nature, what is your take on this?
I think that when it comes to, and I know like you were saying a few minutes ago, when it comes to things like Bigfoot and Dogman, there's old school cryptozoology where people believe that they are nothing but physical. And then you have on the other side of it, you have the other half of people that tend to believe that there's more to them than the physical aspects of them. Give a good example, and I'm gonna start off with this, and this comes up quite a bit when it comes to like Bigfoots and Dogmen. On the as far as the side who thinks that it's more paranormal, more metaphysical, is that they are interdimensional beings, and that they are able to traverse to and from here through the use of portals. And I know a lot of people are just like, oh, you know, portals are bunk. How could you even believe in that? If we look into other areas briefly for a second here, David Paulides, who covers the missing 411 with all those missing people, he's come across various accounts of people that have gone missing and were found in areas where they shouldn't have been. Like there was an incident where a 5-year-old boy was walking behind his family, and they turned around and say something to him or see if he was going to catch up, and he was gone. They found him through air rescue several hours or days later, and he was totally on a cliff, completely intact, and nobody had any idea how he got there. And if you look at shamans, there are shamans out there that will tell you that there are portals out there, and there are different types of beings that come in and out of these portals.
Well, you know, I'm willing to have an open mind on these sorts of explanations as long as there's some kind of theoretical substructure to support it, you know, from theoretical physics, which, you know, there are several theories that have been bandied about lately that might work if they had a little bit more mathematical support for them, you know, and were less theoretical. So, but we'll get into all that. Danny, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I kind of take a few different approaches, and it all just kind of boils down to possibilities for me. I'm a storyteller first, and I collect stories. But when people come and ask me, you know, do I think these things are living, breathing animals, or if they're actually some type of energy that can affect us here on Earth, all I can say is look at the what little bit of evidence we have to prove that these things are physical, as well as to prove that these things are metaphysical. And we have very little, and what we're left with is stories. But looking at our traditions that were passed down to us from our ancestors, you know, for millennia, and the stories that have been retold, like how far back can we, you know, trace like the Kraken? You know, the best I can guess is that's the Odyssey with Skyla, with that underwater beast, and now we found that thing is more than likely the colossal squid. And then how far back does Sasquatch or ape-man like legends go back, you know, to Beowulf or whatever, these types of things of unknown types of creatures. So we have to look at the history and the folklore and just kind of best guess is what I think the best way that we can approach this is to try and build a agreement to work together amongst the folklorists and the hard, rigid scientists. So when we come together, when this topic comes up, neither one is badgering or mocking the other, but looking at the possibilities. Because, you know, our ancestors, the old school scientists, they didn't take these stories for granted. So I think that the idea that Bigfoot could be some type of nature spirit of the forest, or that the creature of Loch Ness could be like the spirit of like an undying or a mer type thing, is an apt hypothesis. But either way, I don't think it's something that I personally, my intent is not to prove, but my intent is to just keep the dialogue open and keeping it friendly so that we can at least keep trying to figure out what these things are, if they are anything at all beyond simple stories. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's check in with little Stevie Wonder. What's your take on all this?
Little Stevie Wonder.
Yeah. And take your sunglasses off. It's rude to wear sunglasses on TV.
I've been called many things, but I've been called many things, but never little. But as far as what Jen and Danny have stated, I'm right up there with them. I myself believe there's like the Bigfoot phenomena is more metaphysical than flesh and blood animals. Just from my research I've done, you know, over the years, and all the accounts, you know, of all these strange goings-on around the creatures and the things they're supposed to be able to do, like mind speak, telepathy, strange things seen, like, you know, orbs around them. And I'd like to get into more later about the creatures being seen quite often with UFO sightings coinciding with them. So, to me...
You're coming in and out. Can't hear you very well.
Oh, sorry about that. Like I said, to me, the Bigfoot phenomena is more coinciding with UFO sightings the more I research. So I'm more on the fence of them being more of a metaphysical entity. But I've always been very open-minded, and I can agree somewhat with both sides, but there's like Danny says, there's no real proof either way, for the total existence of this creature. So we can't rule out either side. I don't believe. So,
well, you look
that's
at
where I stand.
Yeah, you look at these intractable mysteries, and either way you turn it, there's always something. I mean, just looking at Bigfoot, okay, you've got the idea that there is a population, a large group, probably a reproducing population of 8-foot-tall, 1,000-pound, gorilla-looking humanoids hiding in the woods on the perimeters of a highly civilized civilization with technology that we ought to be able to detect them.
Exactly.
People go out looking for these creatures and find no remains of dead ones, but they find lots of footprints everywhere. So even if you turn around and say, see, there's no place for them to hide, there's not enough food to support a big population of them, what is leaving all these footprints in the woods?
Well, you know what, though?
Now,
when it comes, I would like, may I add something, please?
Yeah. Sure.
When it comes to survival with the Bigfoots in the woods, is they work in clans. They have families. They don't just go after wildlife. They eat vegetables that grow in the wild. They'll eat fruits and berries that you can find out in the woods and the forests as well. And several years ago, my late husband and I and our team did a Bigfoot expedition on the land of a fellow investigator who's a shaman, Don Young. And we set up cameras. We used every piece of technology that was current and not current to try and catch anything. And at one point, the DNR had planted turnip patches up the trail from where we had been camping. So Don took Kevin to investigate this turnip patch, and while they were there, we started hearing 2 knocks from the east and 3 knocks from the west. These knocks went on for 5 minutes. Don explained to us later, what we all kind of figured it out anyway, was that was them communicating each other. They were telling each other how many of them were there and how many had actually gotten up and walked away. And after about 5 minutes, when they came back from the turnip patch, they heard the knocking, and a minute later, the knocking completely stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know they're alleged to communicate that way, and they're also alleged to throw rocks, too.
Yeah, they throw rocks. And one thing I want to touch on metaphysically with that is they're some kind of an animal species. Like most animals, they can sense the good and the bad in a person. And so what I learned over the years of studying them, that when you have people coming onto the land and maybe getting rocks thrown at them and such, it makes you wonder, because these things go by your energy. When you pull up to where they are, they're going to know that you're there, and they're going to know how many of you are there and what your intentions are. And if you treat them respectfully and you treat the forest, the home that they live in, respectfully, you'll have peace and quiet. You may get some interaction, but I think it goes based on energy, because if you see like these TV shows of people going out into the woods, they'll purposely go looking for a Bigfoot, but they'll do stupid stuff to provoke one. And that's when all this stuff starts happening to them.
Yeah, well, part of the problem with these television expeditions is they not only go back looking for Bigfoot, they're dragging a television crew behind them.
Right.
As
you
they're
can't
doing
go in there
it. So, yeah.
Right. You can't go in there with like 3 to 4 guys and then have an extra amount of crew of like 26 to 38 people, because you're not going to find anything.
No. But like I was saying, even if you totally dismiss Bigfoot, that still doesn't answer what's leaving all these footprints in the woods. So you're right back to the mystery, you know. And then if you say, oh, it's just the Bigfoot researchers faking the footprints, I mean, that somebody would have been busted, you know. I mean, a few people have been busted and have fessed up, but to account for all those footprints and some of the places they've been found, you know, it's just, and also, you know, the idea that they're all of these humanoid-looking footprints with well-defined toes and all this are all where bears have stepped in their hind feet is a little too much to buy either. So
yeah, that's kind of ludicrous.
And you know, one criticism that is thrown at cryptozoology by the mainstream biologist, and it may be valid up to a point, is that the case for too many cryptids is built primarily on anecdotal eyewitness evidence, which is not useless as evidence, but it's very weak evidence. You can't go back and verify it, you know. You're left with just this person said this and no other evidence to corroborate it unless there happens to be a picture or a video or a hair sample or a footprint from that particular sighting, you know, to back it up. So, you know, and the reason the biologists take this tack is that they're used to working with biological specimens. And if you have no biological evidence to present them with, they're kind of like, well, I don't know what to do with this, you know?
Yeah, and it's rough. And then, you know, too, you have to look at the rate that people hoax stuff, because there have been plenty of incidences where people have faked footprints to the point where they've actually lied and said that they had, you know, Bigfoot remains in freezers.
Yeah.
Then you have, right, and then you have the handful of other ones that go out there and dress up in a suit, basically, and mess with people and try to scare them, because it has happened. And my problem with that is there are serious people out there that are looking for evidence. There are people that want to go about it humanely, and then there are people that want to go about it inhumanely as far as trying to prove an existence by catching one and killing one. So if you're walking around in a monkey suit in the middle of the woods and you come across either one of these two people, you might get shot. People don't realize that.
There was one guy that was trying to fake something in a Bigfoot suit, got hit and killed by a car recently, sometime over the last couple of years. So, you know, the hair samples, you know, have come back with disappointing results. There are a couple that Sykes examined that came back human, but the thing with that is we know that chimpanzee and human DNA is 99% the same. So it's possible that a few of these supposed Bigfoot hairs that have come back identified as human may actually be Bigfoot, and it's so close to being human that they can't tell the difference at this point. I don't know.
It's a possibility.
You know, even some of the critics of Melba Ketchum's study find some validity in some of the work that she's did, even though it's been heavily criticized. So I wouldn't completely throw that study in the garbage either, you know? And as far as what I do, the closest thing we got so far is the Loch Ness environmental DNA study, which has its set of problems too, because there are animals that they know that exist or get into Loch Ness occasionally that are unaccounted for in the environmental DNA survey, such as seals and otters.
Yep.
And the closest thing they could point to try to identify Nessie was an overwhelming amount of eel DNA, where the implication that the Loch Ness Monster could be some kind of giant eel we don't know about. So that's better than nothing. Right. You know, the big disappointment was not finding any reptilian DNA. So maybe they just didn't sample enough, or you know, maybe Nessie. If there's a reptilian Nessie, maybe it's not in the lake all the time. Maybe it comes and goes from the sea. We just don't know, you know. So
right. With Nessie, there could be like caves under the water. I mean, there's so many possibilities. It's like Kevin said, when they do these DNA researches, and he felt this way, and I feel this way about it too, especially when they release results on TV. I never feel that we're getting all the answers that we want. Like there is something that they're not telling us.
Well, touching on that point, there is a formal paper coming out about the Loch Ness environmental DNA, but it's in the referee process. It should be coming out probably next year, I would imagine. So
hopefully
nice. That will have more information than we need in that paper, you know. So, you know, during the course of researching this, I came up on all kinds of crazy stuff. Not that I want to dwell on it, but there's one guy out on the West Coast. He makes his living as a lawyer. A guy named Andrew D. Basaggio. And on the side, he claims that he was involved in a time travel project sponsored by DARPA for the government. And has made all these crazy claims about he's been to Mars through teleportation and discovered Bigfoot-like humanoids and Martian plesiosaurs and all kinds of crazy stuff. And this guy goes around giving lectures and getting paid to give these lectures on this stuff. And yeah, I mean, this is real. You know, I'm not making this up. And then I think I mentioned on the last program about Ed Dames, who's a retired Army major that claims to have worked for the CIA on a remote viewing project. And at some point, he was asked to look at Loch Ness, and his claim was that he could see the Loch Ness Monster, and it kept disappearing and reappearing as if he was watching it. And he came to the conclusion that it was the ghost of a plesiosaur, was his opinion. And I was actually able to find a declassified CIA report that confirms his claims. You know, that just confirms that he believes this. That doesn't prove that any of this is true. But this is the kind of crazy stuff that's out there that most people don't know about. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't personally know of that one myself.
Yeah, so there's a lot of crazy stuff out there.
I remember hearing that one a while back. I think the first time I heard that one was on back when Art Bell was still doing his show.
Yeah, Ed Dames has been a guest on Coast to Coast several times back in the day when Art Bell was still hosting it. Yeah.
It's a very entertaining theory.
But
and you know
what do you got to back it up, though, from a scientific standpoint? That's the point I'm getting at.
Right.
Well, the metaphysical isn't really acknowledged by the scientific side, you know, and we're dealing with a whole different type of approach here. And that's the thing, that if these things are metaphysical, there's no way to prove or disprove them outright because there's really nothing there.
Well, maybe there is. The idea is that out on the fringes of theoretical quantum mechanics and theoretical physics, there's all this talk about multiple universes and wormholes and black holes and all kinds of weird things like that involving electromagnetic fields that could potentially open up some kind of doorway between dimensions.
Yep.
And possibly even time travel. So that's exactly what we're talking about. But the point is that all this stuff is all theoretical at this point. It exists as a mathematical formula. You can't physically demonstrate it in a laboratory for the most part.
Right. It's not written in stone.
Yeah. So these are abstract, theoretical, possible answers to what we're talking about.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with keeping an open mind, because you never know what
I'm not saying you shouldn't keep an open mind, but as far as, putting it on the same footing with what we know about physical biology, which is a whole different thing, that's a hard science.
Oh, totally. I'm not saying it's not. I acknowledge that completely.
Yeah,
it's like look at the remote viewing. When you talk about the government stuff with the military, they've done various things that we know about. I mean, there are books out on projects that they've done. And
of course.
I think
I don't discount that.
Right, and I think we're only being spoon-fed so much of what they do, opposed with what they keep to themselves.
Yeah. Well, the other science, and it's very controversial even to this day, but it is recognized as a science that has some bearing on what we're talking about, is parapsychology.
Yep.
The best data that parapsychology has been able to come up with and quantify in any form is the existence of extrasensory perception. And even the best case that they can make for that is highly controversial with skeptical scientists that don't really consider parapsychology a real science, even though it's in the American Academy of Sciences as an accepted science group.
Yeah.
There are still people that reject it as pseudoscience. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I read an article about the controversy over parapsychology, and the author in this particular article says that part of the problem is that the data that parapsychology is studying has very little to do with mainstream psychology, in this author's opinion. And he said it would be better to call it paraphysics. So where I'm going with this is that this guy's idea that parapsychology data is actually some kind of physics problem that we don't understand would seem to connect the best data from parapsychology to this advanced theoretical physics that I'm talking about. In other words, what I'm trying to say is we may be looking at two sides of the same coin here, if you follow me.
Yeah.
It's just being called different things in different branches of science, in different disciplines. I don't know.
Well, who came up with that term, parapsychology? Because, para, doesn't that mean, just one side of psychology?
Well, I always thought that para meant beyond something.
That's more meta, I thought. But anyway, when we talk about parapsychology, and again, bear in mind, proving anything like this is almost next to impossible. But then we're dealing with aspects of faith and aspects of belief and culture. And when it comes to parapsychology, what I find interesting is different faiths around the world. They're willing to accept the myths and legends that are within their own little bubble. But when a new type of legend or myth that is more metaphysical in nature comes to them from a different faith, a different religion, They definitely poo-poo it. And in a lot of ways, I think that can also be attached towards certain aspects of science, because I think if we just took a more scientific approach towards what people are calling parapsychology or ghosts and looked at it logically and looked at all the different possible explanations from, swamp gas to ball lightning or trips of light, etc., as well as the possibility of more otherworldly explanations, and bring all this to the discussion. I think
that's what I'm trying to do.
Religion is can be just as poo-pooed and laughed at and mocked at as any parapsychological story, because it is based upon the supernatural also. But it's funny that so many hard scientists that were also hard religious and faithful, they'll accept the magic that comes from that end, but completely disregard what other type of quote-unquote magic or metaphysical elements come from another end of the spectrum. So there's a lot of hypocrisy in this pot being stirred in at the same time, too. I think a lot of it involves what is safe to admit might actually be there. What is safe to look at, and I just think that we are fighting culture and faith and belief as well as science when we bring this up to discussion. I think that we just need, and honestly, I think it's a losing battle on our end until we can actually until one of us can actually pull the veil aside on a stage in front of 100 scientists and have them come up and actually meet whatever type of metaphysical being we can bring out from beyond the veil. I don't think we're going to be able to prove anything, because photographs are faked too easily. Anecdotal and eyewitness accounts are mocked and foolhardy.
Yeah, well, the only thing that's going to work with the biologist is a unambiguous physical specimen or a part of a body or body something.
Yeah.
That absolutely is, unambiguous, that you can't say, oh, this is a mutilated shark or,
Yeah.
Right.
Which, is entirely reasonable. And if these things exist as animals, we ought to, at some point, be able to find something.
Well, we have. They're just not quite as... I think that's the problem with cryptozoology, is everyone's expecting the most extravagant thing possible. Like, people want it to be the dinosaur. People want it to be the big, huge monster, but really what folklore does is that, when you tell a story, it gets bigger with every telling. And you give that thing, decades, centuries of retelling, and something that is an aardvark, which was a cryptid, has a mythical legendary sense attached to it until we find out that it's just a little nocturnal burrowing animal. I think with the chupacabra falls in that category, which I think may very well have been like the Mexican hairless dog. But there's other elements of the folklore that I may not be familiar with that could prove it to be something more alien or even more dark. It's just how we look at these things. But I mean, look at all of the animals that were grotesque monsters and brought fear to people, like the giant panda, the mountain gorilla, the Komodo dragon. They were monsters, but now they're in zoos.
Absolutely. That's how they got started, is through monster stories. And somebody went to investigate the monster stories and found the real animal behind the story.
And so when you retell that story, you're going to tell a story on a campfire about a semi-docile, white and black, though very cute, brown bear that eats bamboo. You're going to tell a story about a big black and white beast that roams the forest and could tear your head off, What do you really want to listen to?
The difference, sitting from today's perspective, the difference is these all happened 100 years ago, or close to 100 years ago, and they happen in remote places that don't have a large civilization around them. Where, on the other hand, we're talking about Bigfoot living in the middle of the heavily populated United States. I'm not trying to rule out Bigfoot here. I'm just trying to point out obvious differences.
Right.
Oh, I would like to point out something really quick. In answer to a statement made earlier, philosopher Max Dessior termed the phrase parapsychology in 1889. Mm-hmm. And it was adopted by J.B. Rhine in the 1930s as a replacement for the term physical research in order to indicate a significant shift toward experimental methodology and academic discipline.
Yeah, well, Rhine and his wife were two of the major figures in the science of parapsychology. If you go look at the history of parapsychology, their names figure very largely. He was active until, I think, the early 70s, mid-70s, and his wife carried on into the 80s. So one interesting aspect of parapsychology is that parapsychology itself, the foundation of the science, was meant to be a demarcation or breaking off from the spiritualist movement in an attempt to study it scientifically without the religious aspect being part of the study. In other words, they were trying to take it out of the religious spiritual realm and move it into science, study the same phenomenon but with a more scientific approach, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And to this day, there's still somewhat of a split. There are people that stayed with the spiritualist movement into what it evolved into, which would probably include the modern day ghost hunters, So there's kind of even today, there's kind of a disconnect between amateur ghost hunters and formal parapsychologists. And I don't know why that is.
Well, just take a look at the real shows they have on TV now. All the paranormal shows. I mean, they're pretty much a joke. They're more for entertainment than anything else. And I won't name the names, but there's a few that are pretty good. But the others are just laughable.
Well, of course, they're for entertainment. That's all they are. Because it's just like there's so much information that we could add to the discussion on these shows, but that would mean that those shows would have to be 3 hour longs per episode. And we all know people don't have that type of attention span anymore. So they just give us the fluff of the whole thing, which, these shows are like hunting for or looking for. I mean, they make me throw up in my mouth because they make every single one of us who take this seriously look bad. And they put us all in the same category, which I did not include myself with any of those people at all, because my approach is a hell of a lot different from what they do.
Well, that's the problem, is that parapsychology, cryptozoology is not a formally recognized science. Therefore, there is no cryptozoological guild or formal hierarchy of leadership. Anybody can call themselves a cryptozoologist at will and do whatever they want to, and there's no cryptozoology police to stop them.
No, and it's awful. They're zoologists. That's what they should be.
There are people in the field that I think that go out in the woods and they're not really looking for anything. They're just going out with their buddies to drink some beer and stumble around the woods and say they're squatching, for what that's worth. I mean, if that's what they want to do, there's nothing I can do to stop them, but it's not performing a cryptozoology investigation. And I think a lot of the ghost hunters are doing the same thing. They've got their friends, and they like to go hang out in the supposed haunted house and drink a few beers and laugh and cut up and hang around. It's something to do.
did, and
Well,
you know what? And I would like to clarify something here, because there is, and I don't mean any disrespect, a difference between ghost hunters and paranormal investigators. My husband, my late husband, as you know, was the founder of the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited. I have now taken his place. We call ourselves investigators because we deal with the clients before, during, and after, because there is a lot that goes on. And a lot of the stuff that you see on TV, and I mean, we do investigations that could take days. You know, they never talk about the miles that you have to drive, the gas that you burn, the food that you have to have when you travel these places, the equipment, the constant batteries. There is so much.
I know exactly what you're talking
it.
about.
Right. There is so much that goes into it that people take it for granted, and they just look at these programs and see that, and they'll automatically think that's how investigators investigate. We don't. As a matter of fact, we had a couple joined us a couple of years ago. They were actually shocked at the way we did things because they were expecting it to be what it was like on TV when it was the complete opposite.
Right.
You know, we're talking about going to locations and setting up nerve sensors and placing equipment and recorders and all this other stuff around. You may see 5 to 10, even 15 minutes of it on TV. And as far as doing a real reveal, that could take days to weeks and sometimes months to get everybody's stuff together to put it into one big reveal. And so I just wanted to say that without any disrespect.
Yeah, well, you know, what you're talking about is what real parapsychologists do.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got a book. I consider it the Parapsychology Bible. It's by the head of the Duke Psychic Labs. A guy named Richard S. Broughton wrote this book back in the early 90s called Parapsychology, the Controversial Science. And it goes into everything. He's even got like a chapter on apparitions, which are rare but do happen, which is a scientific term for a ghost.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so people do still study this, but like you're talking about, Jennifer, the data doesn't just pop up overnight. You know, you've got to sit there and put some time into it to acquire any useful data, you know? And even then, it's highly controversial.
Yeah, I mean, ghost hunters, your average ghost hunters that watch these TV shows, go out, they buy the equipment, and they do the same things they see on TV, and they keep that stuff for themselves. I can't even tell you how the number of times that Kevin and I have heard of instances, and we've talked about this on our radio show, to where you see these people that will do all this stuff to feed on TV, go to help a family, and then they'll go in, like there's one incident where these people took in a Ouija board and caused more activity. And when they realized what was in the home, they told them that they couldn't help them and that they were on their own and just left this whole entire family to deal with this whole mess.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, you know, a lot of people laugh at the concept of EVP, but if you go back and look, the origins of EVP were by a scientist. This guy named Raudive wrote a book on it back in, I think, the 1950s. So when the EVP thing first came out, it was considered legit by a lot of parapsychologists. And I think a lot of amateurs have run away with it and made a joke out of it. But originally it was not, so.
Right.
You know, I mean, a lot of what the ghost hunters do that is laughed at are bastardized versions of real parapsychology techniques that are being misused and misunderstood by amateurs who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, especially when it comes to provocation. How many instances have we heard people going in and yelling and screaming at the apparition or entities in that location? I mean, it's constant. If they're not getting activity, they will literally resort to this stuff just to get a response. And then if you have that handful of people that get scratched or they get pushed or they get some form of attack, then all of a sudden, well, it's evil and it has to be stopped, and they don't know what they did wrong. Well, when it comes to human spirit, speaking from a mediumistic standpoint, okay, when you're dealing with the human soul, you're dealing with the human spirit. They may not have their physical body anymore, but their voice is still present, their mannerisms are still present, and their traits are still present. If you go into a location and you don't know the way that the spirit died, or if you do and you blurt it out, that could have serious ramifications, because one, the spirit may or may not know that they're dead, nor would they want to be reminded of how they died.
Well, what do you think about the idea that there exist spirits that have never had a material body? Things like demons or angels or whatever you want to call them.
I think they're real. I think they're real. As being, and this is another hat that I tend to wear with the society, because we have over the years gotten our share of dark cases. And there are demonic beings out there that have never lived. They can masquerade as human beings, men, women, children, animals, but they can't fully take our form because they never lived to begin with. And I think it's the same thing with, like, the more positive love and light angels from God or the Creator, or whoever, you wish to call him. Those particular angels can take the forms of human beings. We hear this term as being Good Samaritan. These are particular angels that may show up at a time or place to help save a person, don't want any recognition, and you can't find them soon after they help you. So I think that when it comes to
some people think that things like Dogman and some of these other stranger cryptids may be some kind of demonic manifestation, apparition of some sort.
Yeah. They could be. I think if you keep an open mind, they could be. They could be ET origin, for all we know. There are so many different theories out there on Dogman. It's hard to kind of just group them all together.
Well, I think that's part of the problem, and I think we touched on that on this show with Kevin, is I think there are some entities, if you want to call them that are lumped into cryptozoology that don't really belong there. Things that are more likely to have an origin in parapsychology, a spiritual creature of some kind, or possibly something alien or interdimensional.
Right.
That is not what we would consider a prehistoric survival or an ordinary animal in the accepted sense.
Yeah, well, it's rough trying to lump them into one particular category because, again, look at how many, and all you know this, look how many different species of animals that are being discovered, and animals that were thought to have been extinct are being rediscovered,
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they're finding birds and all kinds of little mammals that they thought were extinct for, years and years now, that they're showing up again.
On the other side of the coin, though, we're being asked to accept that there's not only Bigfoot living out in the woods and lake monsters in the lakes right next to the woods that Bigfoot's living in, but there's a whole horde of lizard men and loveland frogs and chupacabras and Jersey devils all living in these woods simultaneously at the same time, and we can't find any of them. That's what the skeptics are saying to us.
Yeah, that's what makes me lean more toward the metaphysical side on many of these so-called cryptids.
All right, well, then you open up a whole new can of worms, okay? So there's dimensional doorways opening up at random in different places. Why doesn't one of these interdimensional doorways randomly open up in the middle of somebody's house? If this is just happening at random,
I don't know.
Or is somebody controlling it? Is it only happening in certain select places.
Right. Yeah.
Or
well,
is there only specific places on the face of the earth where everything is right, the physical circumstances are right to open up one of these doorways?
Right.
In other words, are there actually flap areas because of there are areas that these doorways only open up in, if you follow me?
Yeah. Right. Well, John Keel was a main follower of that, and I'm sure as you know that. And he proposed there were window areas, pretty much around the world, which I believe also. It could be even parallel dimensions, or what he calls multiverse theories. But and he calls them ultra-dimensionals, some of these entities. So,
well, the physicist Michio Kaku states that there are probably 11 different universes, and that probably each of these different 11 universes have a different vibration rate for the neutrons and protons. That the matter is different because of the vibration rate of the atoms, I guess.
Yeah.
And that something that came from another universe into ours, the matter might be slightly different.
Yeah.
The physical constitution of it. So that opens up another question. Let's say biological animals are coming through dimensional doorways or time doorways into our world. Are they still just physical animals while they're here? Or are they made of something else?
Right.
Which is a whole different, say you've got an interdimensional creature that came into our universe and died, and we found it. Would its matter be the same as ours or what,
Right. On that same course, just like you mentioned Bigfoot, if it's interdimensional, if it's coming through a door or a window, it's definitely leaving footprints and traces.
Yeah.
So
nobody's denying that.
That's physical evidence. That's physical evidence. So
that tends to suggest that it's not just an apparition. It's made out of something.
Right. Exactly.
Even the parapsychologists think that maybe ghosts are made out of something. Whatever you want to call it, ectoplasm was the old concept.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually back in the spiritualist days. There was a guy that actually took samples of ectoplasm from a seance and studied it in a laboratory.
Yep.
And they found out that some of the, quote, ectoplasm used by fake mediums back during the late 1800s, early 1900s was actually made out of a substance called cheesecloth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of that back then.
So, as far as being physical, there were samples of physical ectoplasm, but a lot of it turned out to be made out of known substances.
Yeah, hoaxes,
Yeah,
hoaxes.
But not all of it, apparently.
No.
Let me open up this file I found, and it talks about it. Let's see here. But, there are some people that think that things like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster are spiritual entities. Tulpas, time projections, all kinds of weird theories,
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I think, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to, Bigfoot and Dogmen, I think when I prefer to use the term interdimensional because I've always felt that way about these particular types of beings. And I think that when they're here where we are in our reality, they have the means to adapt. That's the way any other known physical animal would in our environment.
Right.
But I also think that they have metaphysical properties that not too many people are aware of. And as far as portals can be opened up by people too. I mean, if you look at people that do rituals, they'll open doorways. That's basically a portal or a vortex. So there are so many different possibilities with both, but that's what I'm thinking when it comes to portals, because like when you had mentioned not hearing about a person having a portal in their home, well, we don't necessarily know that because we haven't heard about that. But if you have people that purposely open doors inside their homes, then yes, they could have doorways.
Right.
We have to remember that the people on our side have to be debunkers too. And, you know, a lot of this could just be stories. I mean, stories, what if the whole Sasquatch phenomena or it's just like another boogeyman used to frighten children to not, you know, to not misbehave or to not go out in the forest when they shouldn't, you know, things like that.
Yep.
I think some of these, not all of them, I certainly hope not all of them, but I'm certain that a good number of these things that we talk about, we try to decipher and look at as a possible being real things could be just simple folklore. And that doesn't diminish the value of it. It's still folklore. It's still an important story, and it still affects people emotionally. And that emotional effect exists. I think that's the importance of folklore, is that it affects us whether or not that thing, has a physical element. It still has a physical effect, a mental effect on a society, on a culture, so much that this thing lives on. And then if we take that, and if we look at the idea of tulpas and thought forms as a legitimate possibility, could enough people who are focusing on something create something? Like a thought form, could Bigfoot be one of the world's most powerful thought forms, or tulpas? Could the Loch Ness Creature be one of the world's most powerful thought forms, or tulpas? You know, could Jesus, could religious myths be thought forms when people see these things? This is another element that we have to consider. But as well as you know, not calling it bullcrap, but calling it a story that has grown and has thrived, making it something that's real in people's hearts, and the fear is real, and the passion is real, and the love of these stories are real, but they might not be totally real and manifest in the way that we would like them to. I think that we need to recognize that we have to debunk and bring or maybe not debunk, but bring other options to the table besides just trying to prove it's real, a living, breathing, or metaphysical thing, but other elements so that we can be taken more seriously.
Well, the truth is that in a lot of cases, people get bored and make stuff up just because they're bored. And this leads to things like there are little ponds all over the United States that have monster stories in them.
Well,
just ridiculous to contemplate that something really tangible could exist in some of these little bitty tiny lakes.
Unless it's
and
a
it's
nature
probably
dun, dun, dun.
Well, yeah, if it's some supernatural thing, yeah, maybe. But I think in a lot of cases it's just somebody got bored and decided to make up a story. And usually the way you can tell the difference is you can track down these stories, and there's never any specific incident or a name or somebody that you can go talk to that can verify the story. It's just an open story that so-and-so said this happened because somebody else told them, you know. That's usually a red flag right there, you know.
And then we have folklore, and we have storytelling, when something that keeps told and retold without a real basis of reality. And I think that, but then, you know, on a more open-minded approach, you know, with a lot of folk like Manly Palmer Hall, Rudolf Steiner, Leadbeater, they all talk about nature spirits and how, like, you know, in Fey lore, you know, every tree, every body of water, every stream has nature spirit or spirits that belong there and thrive there.
Yeah.
And again, it just comes to how we want to approach it, and we can approach it from like 100 different directions of possibility, and it's just, I just think that we keep going in circles, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we have to admit that until we can really, like you said earlier, we have the physical manifestation to prove same conversation for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And
well, I don't know what's going on here, but my PDF file opener has decided to stop working on me.
Well, Mercury's still in retrograde.
Flying without a net here. So I'm going to be talking about stuff, and I can't remember people's names, but trust me, I have stuff to back this up.
That's what happens when planets are in retrograde. Nothing works.
Something, yeah. I don't know. Yep. But anyway, did any of you guys see George Tsoukalos has two shows, In Search of Aliens and Ancient Aliens. And I can't remember which one it is, but there was one. He decided to drag the Loch Ness Monster into his crazy stuff.
I know what you're talking about. I know it, and I can't remember which one it is either.
So the whole theme of this show, the whole thing of the theme of the show was that somehow quartz deposits were generating energy and opening up a time doorway in which plesiosaurs could come from the Mesozoic era into our time and wind up in Loch Ness and Lake Champlain and then go back out. And this was proposed by a physicist named John Brandenburg, and I read up on him, and he's a creationist that has also proposed that there was a nuclear war on Mars, which kind of brings us back to the whole Martian plesiosaur guy through a different doorway. So, you know, I don't know what to think about that, but getting back to this quartz idea, something a little bit more credible that might answer this stuff from outside of biology, but not exactly a paranormal answer, is this guy, I can't remember his name, it's in the PDF, which I can't open. But anyway, this guy proposed that there was the possibility that quartz could generate electromagnetic fields that could trigger hallucinations in the human mind in certain places, and that perhaps these apparitions and monster sightings were caused by this hallucination caused by the electromagnetic generated by quartz. So in other words, this guy's talking about electromagnetic fields creating hallucinations within the human mind in certain places where there are large deposits of quartz, which might include places like Loch Ness and Lake Champlain.
Well, they have
So this guy's idea is not supernatural. It's controversial, but it is within the realm of what we know about the material universe.
Yeah.
So,
well, they say the same thing about the quartz and other mineral compositions affecting paranormal sites also. That it could generate them more, along with water. Water is another great generator, they say.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of, interesting ideas. But anyway, I'll mention this because this is not something supernatural. This is something in the human mind being affected externally by electromagnetic energy. So we're not talking anything supernatural here or metaphysical, really. We're talking about some kind of unknown phenomena within the physical world as we understand it. But now the problem with that explanation is that hallucinations within the human mind do not appear on film do not affect the external world and leave footprints, and don't appear in photographs, in theory. So, that stuff right there, if you want to say, okay, every time somebody sees one of these things, it's electromagnetic energy affecting their brain, but anytime they find a footprint or take a photograph or shoot a video, it's all faked.
Yeah, right.
That's the corner you're backed in with that argument there. So, getting back to the question of, okay, let's say things like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, all these other cryptids are supernatural, parapsychological, whatever you want to call them. Are they just visions, or are they physical? Are they made out of something? If they're not animals, are they made out of some other substance, some spiritual substance, or something we don't understand, like ectoplasm?
I would like to think
do
that
they take the physical form,
I would think because they could take the physical form that they're made of more than just what would be considered by people like a tofa or like a hallucination or a vision. I think that they're very physical. Like I said earlier.
There are some classic ghost photographs that haven't been completely debunked. The one I point to that I've never been able to find anything to really get rid of is the tulip staircase photograph.
Oh, the Great Lady of Raynham Hall. Yes.
Well, that's a good one too. But the one I'm talking about is where you see this. It looks like somebody wearing a robe with a hood on it, going up a spiral staircase.
Yep.
Was taken in Canada back in 1966.
Yeah, it looks like a hand on the banister.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I put it in the slideshow for the show we're doing here, and I also put in the brown lady photograph too.
Yeah. Well, here's another one that we're never able to debunk: the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
I have to find an image of it, but there was a team out of Chicago that went to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, and they used their infrared and night vision cameras, or was it ultraviolet? I'm trying to remember. And they were taking photos of the cemetery. When they went back to look at the photos that they had taken, there was a clear outline of a woman sitting on top of a headstone.
Yeah, it was like a stone bench.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it was in a little.
Please dig that up and send me a copy so I can check it out.
All right, I'm going to go look for it while we're talking.
So, if you propose that these creatures and the sightings associated with them are not animals in the accepted sense, and that there's something paraphysical or metaphysical going on, I would think you would be able to document some kind of residue of an electromagnetic energy field or something left behind where something like that happened. Right. And there may be indications that this is possible because recently my friend Andy McGrath interviewed Bigfoot researcher Paul Bartholomew on his show. And Paul was talking about there was a UFO landing apparently somewhere in New York State in 1973, and that there was evidence of a medical physical effect left behind at the site where the UFO landed, in that for some reason the hot and cold water faucets in the bar were reversed somehow. That the hot water was cold and the cold water was hot. And I've also read in the UFO literature over the years that there have been, radiation effects, electromagnetic effects, even slight ones left behind at places where these UFOs have landed. So if I was going out into the field to investigate what I believe to be some kind of supernatural or metaphysical cryptid encounter, I would be bringing the sorts of things that parapsychology researchers use to look for electromagnetic fields, and maybe even a Geiger counter to look for radiation anomalies.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm saying is that to the advocates out there that are proposing these paranormal explanations, at least make an effort, if you're doing field research, to come up with some kind of physical evidence of an electromagnetic effect or radiation effect or something beyond just saying, oh, it's portals, it's a vortex. I mean, that's a statement in a vacuum. Try to come up with some kind of evidence to back up this idea, is what I'm saying. Is that asking too much?
No, not at all.
I don't think it is. You know?
Because it's almost impossible to get it. You can't get a Bigfoot to come out from behind the tree when you want it to.
Yeah,
and
I mean, if you just walk around explaining everything away with a portal or a vortex or an interdimensional doorway, you're removing the burden of evidence from your own work. In other words, if I'm saying that there's some kind of animal in Lake Champlain, the burden of proof is on me to come up with something in the nature of a bone or a body or something to the best of my ability. And I've been trying to do that now for 27 years and have not come up with it yet.
Right.
Which some people say, well, see, that proves there's nothing there. But, you know, and the people that think there's a physical Bigfoot are coming back with footprints with dermal ridges, which is in itself is controversial, hair samples, things like the Patterson film, you know, which in itself is still controversial. But anyway, that's something. It's better than nothing, you know? You got photographs and videos from Lake Champlain and Loch Ness that are controversial, but nonetheless, they do exist, and you can go back and look at them again and again and again and restudy them. Right. People can go tear the Patterson film apart 100 times. It's there. You can go look at it. It's been stabilized. It's been digitized, you know. You can go back and study it again and again and again. You know, if somebody makes all these outrageous claims about, oh, I've seen Bigfoot 25 times and I've habituated them and all this stuff, and every time you ask them, oh, okay, how come you don't have a photograph? How come you don't have this? How come you don't have that? Oh, it disappeared into a portal. Yeah. You know, at least go to the place where you believe the portal is and try to come back with some kind of electromagnetic evidence or radiation residue evidence. At least try to come back with something other than, oh, it disappeared into a portal.
Right, but you can very well go to those areas and look for physical stuff, which I would encourage people to do if they have, you know.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to be a complete butthole here. I'm just saying at least try to come back with something, you know?
Right, but I do want to say something really quick. When it comes to portals, if you can get evidence that there's one in a location where you saw like a Bigfoot or a dogman, and you can find some way to get that on record, that's awesome.
I mean, let's face it, there are some charlatans. There are some charlatans in the cryptozoology field that use this portal crutch to get away with murder.
Yeah, so they're using portals in every area, so I totally understand that.
Yeah, I don't think they're cryptozoologists or even should have the title cryptozoologist if they're using that term. Because, I mean, cryptozoology should be strict science. If you're going to talk about portals, let's talk about more metaphysical areas. But let's, you know, I'm kind of with Scott on this. Like, we need to keep things in certain defined areas. Otherwise, there's a lot of pollution involved, and it's hard to defend. You know, it's hard to defend cryptozoology when we're trying to study animals and we bring up the term portals. You know, I think Bigfoot is a sticky situation because, you know, we have all these different types of stories, different variations all around the world, you know, and it's just the vocabulary that we use is going against us, especially when we keep using the word monster all the damn time. I think that's the word that's stabbing
the
us.
reason I use it is because it's easy to use. I mean, when it comes to things like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, my understanding in that context is it's just a tool to call something that we don't know what it is. It's an animal of some kind, but it's a weird animal. So it's a monster in that sense. I think most people get that, you know. But
I see what you're doing, but we live in a society where pop culture owns all these things now. And, you know, monster doesn't no longer means like larger than life. It literally means something dark and evil and grotesque.
Yeah.
Right. And like when I said Loch Ness creature, I think creature is a good term to use because it kind of has its both feet, you know, in both pools of like the spooky water as well as like the more realistic water at the same time. You know what I mean? There's this thing, if it's a creature, this creature in Lake Champlain, you're going to get people to kind of listen to you a little bit more, a little more attentively and more, you know, pragmatically than say like, you know, there's a monster in there.
Well,
this monster.
I don't use the word monster in the same context when I'm talking about Frankenstein as I'm talking about the Loch Ness Monster. It has a different meaning, but maybe I'm just close to it, you know.
I get what I know what you mean, but people just can't. People aren't smart enough to differentiate. That's my point. I think people are stupid.
Well, especially nowadays, we're living in a culture that has really dumbed people down, and I don't know why. It's really sad, you know. I mean, you got people believing in the flat Earth, and then we never went to the moon, and all kinds of crazy stuff, you know.
Oh, you know what I love? I love the gigantic, like Devil's Tower being a tree stump. Oh, I love that stuff. It's so fun to hear them talk about that.
Well, there are petrified tree stumps, but not that big. You know?
You know what I would like to say this too. Yeah, I would like to say that when it comes to portals, I agree. I don't think it should be in cryptozoology, but I do believe in paracryptozoology, and that's where I think the term portal.
Well, that's what Kevin. That's what the legacy that Kevin left us.
Yeah.
Is this concept of paracryptozoology, which is a bridge between normal cryptozoology and parapsychology and ufology. It's this area in between where you could put something like Mothman or the Flatwoods
it's its own
Monster.
Place, though.
Exactly.
It's its own area.
And I think that portal should be lumped into that area, not so much cryptozoology, because it just, when I look at regular cryptozoology versus paracryptozoology, when you look at portals, it doesn't fit in normal cryptozoology.
No, it doesn't. Normal cryptozoology is only concerned with the possibility of flesh and blood, normal physical animals that live in this physical reality that we don't know about.
Right.
Now that could include prehistoric survivors of types of animals that lived millions of years ago that, based on living in the modern world, they're so weird, you know, they would be almost considered monsters.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're just survivors of known types of prehistoric animals that we know from the fossil record that lived on this earth in the past. That if they're alive now, they just managed to squeak through somehow by hiding in isolated places where we haven't found them yet.
Right.
See, that's where I draw the line where, in my case, with people saying that Bigfoot is like Gigantopithecus blackie, to me, it doesn't sound right, because this creature, Bigfoot, is, you know, it's been, from all the accounts, all the strange, you know, things happening around it, UFOs being seen with it at the time, light orbs, vanishing, cloaking. I mean, there's a lot of people. Of course, there's a lot of nuts out there. Like we have to put it that. But not all these people can be lying and be mistaking. How something can disappear in the blink of an eye.
Right. Right. Okay. Right.
But like, if it was a descendant of Gigantopithecus, it wouldn't be able to do this kind of thing. It would be a giant lumbering animal, still, up to 800 to 1,000 pounds. It can't disappear in the blink of an eye. So
well, even if you accept the physical Bigfoot, you're still brought up against the problems of how does something this big manage to hide on the edge of our civilization?
Exactly.
Where does it get enough food to eat for an animal that big if it's primarily a carnivore? It lives in the same areas with these humongous bears, Kodiak bears and grizzly bears, and surely it has to interact with them, Right. People like to say that they never find the bones of dead bears and dead cougars and dead deers in the woods, but they do. It's a rare occurrence, but they are found.
Right.
So why don't we find the bones of Sasquatch? Now, the other side of that argument is they know Gigantopithecus got the size of Bigfoot, and the only fossil evidence that we have for it are teeth and a few jaw fragments. Now, why is that?
Yep.
That may be relevant to why we're not finding the bones of Bigfoot now. I don't know. The point is, nobody knows.
Right.
It's a mystery. We just don't know.
And then, physically speaking, if you look at the different areas around the states, like the different regions, it seems to me whenever you hear Bigfoot encounters, they don't all have the same color fur. They tend to have variance. And as far as different colors of fur, like look at the Yeti. Yeti's considered a Bigfoot, and he's pure white.
Yeah.
Well,
I
think with the different color fur, depending on where they are, that if they wanted to physically cloak themselves, when they were in the woods, if it wasn't metaphysical here, I think they could use their fur to blend in with their surroundings.
Well, there may be the problem, too. There may be more than one kind of entity being lumped in together under the umbrella of Bigfoot. In other words, it's entirely possible that you could have some kind of hairy-looking thing coming out of another dimension in part of the cases, and then in the other part of the cases, you may be dealing with a genuine relic hominoid.
Yeah. Well, in some cases,
and if you look at the whole spectrum of Bigfoot reports, there are reports of Bigfoots using language and wearing clothes.
Yeah,
what are you supposed to do with those?
You get that with dogmen too, and there are a lot of people that tend to get dogmen encounters mixed up with Bigfoot encounters and vice versa.
Yeah.
And then you have to look at the more metaphysical things. Look at skinwalkers and Wendigo. Those things are all over the place.
Yeah, and the dogman reports have been broken down into two different categories too.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to do with that. I refuse to believe in literal werewolves.
Right.
And there's nothing in the fossil record except a gigantic baboon, prehistoric baboon, that could possibly account for Dogman.
Right, and for all we know, Dogman could be demonic. Dogman.
That's what I was talking about earlier. It's possible. What was I was going to say something. I'm trying to remember. The origins of Dogman are very murky. Some people say that it was inspired by a radio DJ in Michigan made up a song about a mythical creature called Dogman back in the 80s, and that somehow that people started taking it literally, And that might be the origin of the story in Michigan. I don't know. But, a lot of people point to the so-called Gable film. The Gable film's been exposed as a hoax.
Oh, yeah.
Right out of the gate. Yeah. There's no question. It's a hoax. They interviewed the guy that made it. He showed, them putting the film together and everything, doing the special effects. So the Gable film, you can take that off the table. There's a bunch of Dogman photographs out there, but most of the ones that I've seen look really questionable.
Sketchy.
So your case for Dogman rests primarily on eyewitness accounts. So,
And I was going to say Dogman is more of a recent cryptid, if you could put it that way.
Yeah, where was Dogman in the 70s? But
one of the most credible sightings of a Dogman, and they did a show on this one. I believe it was Paranormal Witness, the east of Bray Road, down here in southern Wisconsin. Yeah. There were several kids that actually parked their vehicle on the side of the road. They saw something. They wanted to check it out, and they got down to the water. They noticed there was like a pack of them. Because if you look at Dogmen and you hear stories about encounters, they're not by themselves, and they use pack mentality. So these poor kids were like terrified and scared out of their wits and like left. They went and had polygraph tests done. Yep. They passed flying colors.
Yeah, well, the problem with the polygraph thing is that passing a polygraph test only tells you that you believe that what you're telling is the truth in your own mind.
Right, but at the same time, all of these kids were together. They all saw the same thing, and they were able to back up each other's claims.
Well, that's true. That's one of the strengths of eyewitness testimony is when you have multiple witnesses that generally corroborate each other. Now, this has happened a few times in Bigfoot, and it's happened a lot of times in the lake monster stuff. There was a lake cruise on the Spirit of Ethan Allen on Lake Champlain in 1984 where 80 people saw Champ all at one time. So it's kind of hard to dismiss something like that,
Yeah, it's massive.
I'm not saying that eyewitness testimony is useless. It's not. If you have a whole bunch of different people over a long time span that keep reporting the same sort of thing, that means something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
it's like
the downside of eyewitness testimony evidence is that they've done psychology research that shows that the human mind and memory does not work like a video recorder. In other words, the longer time goes by, the more your memories can mutate, and your memories are also vulnerable to suggestions by other people.
Yeah.
In other words, if you see something you couldn't identify, and then I come along and I say, oh, you saw the Lake Champlain monster, my suggestion is going to make your idea in your head mutate into looking more like a monster than maybe it initially did from your initial impressions.
Right.
Yeah. So, as many overturned murder convictions and things like that have happened over the years shows the problems with eyewitness testimony and how eyewitnesses can become confused. And they can see two people that look very much alike and be mistaken.
Right. And that can happen.
And it also shows, too, that people can see a glimpse of a bear walking on his hind legs for 10 seconds, walking through the woods and think they saw Bigfoot, or see a dark wave or a floating log and think they've seen the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like a good example.
When you have a sighting where somebody says, okay, I watched this thing for 10 minutes and it held its head up out of the water 5 feet out of the water and his head looked around, I could see the eyes and stuff. That's a different story right there. That's either somebody that's just flat out lying or telling you a significant experience that they witnessed.
Yep.
So,
yeah,
you know.
Totally. And for me, that I brought that particular case up because it was just a case that these youngsters had a solid eyewitness account because they all experienced the same thing.
Yeah. Well, now, one thing I remember that Kevin was talking about was he was talking about the old historical accounts of dog-headed men and things like Anubis from Egyptian mythology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so you do have those, but the thing is, the dog-headed men from old Indian mythology, they seem to be describing creatures that were like men, intelligent, but with the heads of dogs, where you're talking about, with dogman, you're talking about some kind of wolf-like monster animal that doesn't seem to have language or something intelligent like that, you know?
Right. Well, one of the things he was referring to was the Xenocephali, and they were a race of dog-headed warriors around biblical times, I want to say. They could be found in northern Africa.
That's the Egyptian mythology.
Right, that's Egyptian, yes. But there's also ties to St. Christopher.
Anubis.
Because I'm getting to that too, but there are ties to St. Christopher because he was believed to have the body of a human and the head of a dog.
Yeah.
And then look at Anubis, exactly. What is Anubis? Yeah. Anubis is an upright canid, basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what I'm saying is that the creature that's described in the modern dogman reports sounds more like an animal, an upright, bipedal animal with a wolf's head, which is a different concept from some kind of intelligent humanoid creature with the head of a dog. I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying there are marked differences between those concepts and the modern dogman sightings.
Yeah, there are actually listed out there, and I don't have it on me at the moment, 6 different types of variants of dogmen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you got 6 different races of humanoids with dog heads running around the woods, and we can't find any of them? Where are they?
Again, that's why I like to go back to the whole interdimensional thing.
Well, okay,
I don't think that these, again, because I don't feel that all these beings that we're talking about are solely physical. I think that they do have or metaphysical qualities to them. And I think
I'm just playing devil's advocate here, you know?
I know you are. But I think if you place portals into it, then you're talking, that's a whole different, another rabbit hole with portals, because look at paranormal. Human spirits could come through portals and vortexes, whether they're good or bad. Inhuman stuff could come through portals and vortexes.
Yeah. Well,
and to me, it always
supernatural creatures. Do you think they're made out of the same material that ghosts are? In other words, are made out of the same stuff?
Right.
Yeah, I think they're all made out of something for sure.
Yeah.
I think with portals too, I think with portals too, is when you have these beings that come across these openings, will use these to get from point A to point B or to point C, and we're kind of just in between.
Yeah. Well, it's the closest thing I have to come back to for a frame of reference for a material concept of what these things could be made out of is ectoplasm, whatever that is.
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend, and Kevin and I knew, we had him on his show. He was a huge Bigfoot hunter. He only, wanted to catch one in the humane way, not by killing one. And he was told by a shaman that he needed to stay away from these beings because they were basically just fallen angels. And
well, no,
he
that comes to the Nephilim idea.
Right, that comes to the
Sasquatch
Nephilim.
survival of the Nephilim.
Right, that comes to the Nephilim. And he had said that he had an encounter that scared him so bad that he looked at basically Bigfoot as being demonic, or what we were just talking about with the Nephilim.
Well, there are stories that some people think are valid and some people think are bullshit, that there have been these giant mummies found all over the United States with red hair and double sets of teeth and 6 fingers, which they think are the remains of dead Nephilim. So,
yeah, I think it's possible.
Well, I totally believe in giants. I mean, I'm sure that the evidence of giants has been hidden from us.
Well, there's some people that believe these stories that the Smithsonian covered it up, and there's other people that say it's all bullshit.
Well,
so I don't know.
It's a double-edged sword, because if you look at, people that find bones, and there have been reports of this, where people will send the bones in for testing, and they'll call back after a certain amount of time because they don't hear anything, and they'll literally have people from the Smithsonian or these other places telling them that they either that they misplaced it, or they won't get called back at all. So there are some instances where people send in stuff, and you don't see or hear about it anymore because they're not going to want you to know what the findings are about. So they're going to keep it from you, even if it means keeping the physical evidence that you took the time to send it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's funny because the same thing happens a lot of times with Bigfoot hair samples, Jen. They lose it, or, it never got to them, or even UFO, pieces of purported UFOs. They disappear, too.
Well, there's all the controversy about Roswell and the Kecksburg thing, too.
Oh, yeah.
Which ties in with Chestnut Ridge. You want to talk about that some, Steve?
Sure. I can briefly go over that. Well, Chestnut Ridge, of course, is in Pennsylvania, and it's always had, it's been a place of strange happenings and seeing UFOs and strange phenomena and creatures, but especially in the 60s, and it seemed to reach a crescendo around early 1970s, there was a lot of UFO sightings there with Bigfoot creatures associated with them. And one of the main accounts was a guy and a couple of his sons or friends, they were out after seeing a bright orange light come down in a field, and they went out to investigate. And he was carrying a gun, of course, but they saw this large, hairy humanoid creature coming down by a fence, coming toward them, approaching them slowly. And he apparently fired his gun above its head a couple times with, no reaction. And then he immediately fired into it, and still no reaction whatsoever. And when he did shoot at it, and he thought he obviously hit it, the UFO light that was seen behind it, the bright orange light, immediately went out, and the creatures turned and just walked slowly away. So this is a strange account, and it's obviously has something to do with a UFO in my eyes. And
having a brain fart?
Yeah, I am, actually.
Well, I have them occasionally. It's okay. It's a free country.
I refer to mine as fibro-fog.
But this went on for, like I said, from early 60s to the early 70s.
Well, I know the famous Bigfoot UFO thing happened in 1973.
Yep.
And I believe there were some hair samples associated with that case, too, if I remember right.
Oh, one thing I was going to mention, there was corroboration from after that account that I just mentioned, after the creatures disappeared and UFO blinked out. It didn't take off or anything. It just blinked out. It was gone. And they had the police show up, and they corroborated that there was a glowing area where the UFO was, and it lasted for a few hours afterwards. So we have, police officers stating that they saw this evidence, which I would consider evidence, a glowing, on the ground from where the craft was seen. So,
well, in the 21st century, if this happens again, we need better documentation of that kind of evidence.
Oh, for sure.
In some kind of physical form. Now, is Danny B. Stewart still among the living?
Right here.
All right. Well, now let's get some input from you.
Well, I just can't say much more than I already have. I think it just comes down to, the storytelling and following the folklore and, trying to take it for what we have and not try to be belligerent in the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. That's one problem, that moving forward with this stuff, a meaningful discussion, even including skeptics. We need to have the skeptics involved too, and not get pissed off at their points.
Oh, Radford.
Yeah, you can discuss this stuff and make your points and not get personal with it. In other words, just because somebody vehemently disagrees with you on something, it's no reason to let it descend into a personal attack.
Right.
Just look at them and say, okay, I disagree with you, and be respectful and move on from there,
Right.
Yeah. On a personal note, for me, I am a folklorist, and I collect folklore. I collect stories. And I find all the stories fascinating, from, dogmen to Sasquatch to strange lake creatures to fairy folk, goblins and things on the bed and boogeymen. And what I like to do is try and find, kernels and hills and mountains of evidence to back up something. That might validate these stories. And, and sometimes all we have to validate these stories is history.
Yeah.
And repeated story to like the Slender Man, which, today has turned into a pop culture nonsense. And people, it falls into internet folklore, which, I absolutely despise internet folklore. I loathe it.
Yeah.
It's because, there's so much more interesting, legitimate folklore out there that's untouched, and yet we have people focusing on this internet folklore. But what my point is, it falls in the category of internet folklore, but the Slender Man, the Tall Man, the Hat Man, many different names, seen all over the world for centuries. And yet we're ignoring the history of these things. Now, what could these things be? Could they be just blatant folklore, just stories to scare people?
Well, they take on a little life of their own. Look at the girl who stabbed the other girl,
Yeah. And
some people are extremely vulnerable to this kind of stuff. Are so gullible, it's almost dangerous to believe it.
That happened up by me.
Well, I have a tall man on my ghost tour in Provo, Utah, and it's in an alleyway. And what's really interesting is over the last few years, multiple people on my tour say they have actually seen it while behind me while I've been talking.
Well,
now, wasn't that just full of crap? Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, these stories live on through that type of energy.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, and I'm not devaluing their sighting, their story, because maybe they actually saw something. Maybe there really is something back in this alleyway because, the stories are still thriving.
It's subjective. In their own mind, they did see something. It's real to them.
Exactly.
So that's part of the problem.
Or it could be like a sulfur region type thing.
Yeah, well, that's like Kevin and I look at the Slender Man as a tulpa. We've always looked at that particular being as a tulpa because he started out as a creepypasta. And there were these girls, like you guys were just talking about a few minutes ago, and it happened in southern Wisconsin, that believed in this thing so much that they took one of their people that they pretended to be friends with, and basically lured her out into the woods and attempted to kill her so they could go and live with Slender Man and be a part of his gang.
Yeah, there's a documentary about it. It's called Beware the Slender Man.
Yeah.
But we have to remember, these things existed before the creepypasta took ownership.
Yeah.
So, in the folklore, in the vernacular, these things existed. But the problem we have, and each and every one of us, in our own approaches, we have to deal continuously. We're fighting. I think our biggest enemy, our greatest enemy, is pop culture, because of the way that they vilify, they demonize, they turn them into jokes, all these different variations of what we study, our livelihood, our passions, which I think each and every one of us consider them to be part of culture, part of society, and part of what it means to experience humanity. Because these stories, we all grow up with stories like this, and they affect us all in many different ways. Sometimes through fear, sometimes through passion. And enough of us, these stories that we learn in our youth, they push us to delve into these, to literally sell our soul to this type of study, where to us it's more than just creepypasta and fun and fancy. We literally we become investigators and detectives trying to find what little bits of truth exist with each and every one of these. And as I said before, we have kernels of truth and we have mountains of truth, and many times all we're going to find are kernels. And some of us, that's all we need. But we have to accept the fact.
In the skeptic movement right now, there is a school of thought called cryptozoology, and the idea behind that is that some people in the skeptic community think the whole thing is nothing but a sociological phenomenon with no abject reality behind it. I'm not saying I endorse that. I'm just commenting on it.
Well, they'll throw out words, terms like is it called pareidolia? Is that the term where people see faces?
People see an object and they read meaning into it when it's nothing but just an inanimate object, like a tree stump in the woods, like Bigfoot standing there. Yeah, exactly.
Or as a child, in our youth, we're lying in our room and the coat that's thrown over the side of the bed turns into some type of creature.
Exactly, same thing.
In the dark.
Yep.
And what we call the boogeyman sometimes derives from that right there.
Did I tell you the story about the headless woman standing in my driveway?
No.
Back in the summer. Yeah. I hear a noise in the middle of the night, and I look out the window, and there's a headless woman standing in the driveway. And I'm like, oh, my God. Yeah, I took pictures of it, too. So I finally get up the balls to put some pants on and walk outside to confront the headless woman. And I get out there, and it's a fold-up, pop-up tent that my neighbor had left in the driveway. But from a distance in the dark, it looked exactly like a woman wearing a shawl, wearing white pants and a pair of shoes with no head. You couldn't tell what it was until you get right up on it. But I swear to God, if it fooled me, you could put this thing out in the middle of the woods and scare the shit out of somebody.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But then we have another element where these things that we see, they start to move. And then we don't know what the hell we're dealing with because we still can't identify what these things are. Whether or not it's a misidentified type of creature, who knows? I am very open-minded about this, but I also try to look at it, pragmatically, and I think as we all should, so that we don't get cornered with the rest of the individuals who are just trying to, make fun, mock, or, to get attention by creating this nonsense and pop culture element that ultimately is our worst enemy.
Well, we got 5 minutes to wrap things up. So everybody, I'll give everybody 2 minutes. Make about 6 minutes. So go ahead, Jennifer. You got 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, you can find me on Facebook under Jennifer Malek or Jennifer Malek Psychic Medium. You can also find our groups, Lake Monstrosities, Ultimate Conspiracies, and for old and awesome and wonderful show archives. You can go to Paraversal Universe Radio and Paraversal Universe Radio Archives page.
Okay, little Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook under Steve Patrick Carrington and my Facebook group, Anomalous Universe. And, of course, I'm also moderating in Scott's group, Zombie Plesiosaur Society, and Jennifer's group, Lake Monstrosities.
All right,
amongst
Danny.
many other groups.
Hi, yeah, well, you can find me on Facebook also under Danny B. Stewart, and I own and operate the original Provo, Utah Ghost Tour, which has its own site on Facebook. I give ghost tours and fairy walks and lectures about, phenomena that, most people don't take too seriously, but I approach with a different type of, voice, I think. So you can reach me on there if you ever want a tour or a talk or whatever.
All right. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion, and thank you guys for all coming on. And I'm sure Kevin would be proud of us.
Thank you for having us on. And I can say that Kevin is more than proud, and so is Jeff, and they're both looking down on us.
Miss both those guys, and I'm glad we were able to kind of wrap this up, and finish it up. And I thought we got in a lot of good points,
We did. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
All right, well, I guess, as Buford T. Justice once said, it's time to pee on the fire and call in the dogs.
Cool. All right. Keep on rock and rolling.
All right. You guys take care. Thanks for coming on. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.